Meeting to order. Following our agenda for the evening, first thing we need to do is a roll call, and we'll let staff call that out.
Member Wheeler.
Here.
Member Jacobson.
Here.
Member Miles. Member Sparlingwood. Member Rockwell.
Here.
Member Davis. Member Crow. Member Fultz.
Here.
Yep, okay, and Chair Porter.
I'm here.
All righty, we're good there then.
Okay, our first item is adoption of the consent items, if I can speak. We hear a motion on that?
So moved.
All right, and a second. That was the meeting minutes. Any discussion on that? And is there any citizen comment on the adoption of the consent items?
No, sir, there isn't.
All right, hearing no discussion by any of those quarters, all in favor of adopting the consent items, call out, staff will call that roll call.
Member Wheeler.
Aye.
Member Jacobson.
Aye.
Member Miles is absent. Member Sparlingwood absent. Member Rockwell.
Aye.
Member Crow is absent. And Member Fultz.
Jason was here somewhere.
I'm sorry, did you just call my name?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know if it's just my connection is really spotty. I don't know if other folks are experiencing. I might need to log off and get back on because I'm having a really hard time. I'm only catching about every other word.
Oh, okay, we are approving the minutes at the moment.
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
And
Yeah, I approve the minutes.
thank you. Chair Porter?
I also.
Okay, so that motion passes.
Okay, next up is we need to adopt the agenda. So do I hear a motion to adopt the agenda?
So move.
You're a second? Okay, a second from Tim, I believe.
Yes.
All right, and any citizen comment on adopting the agenda?
No, sir, there's not.
All right, any discussion on the agenda for this evening? Okay, hearing none, roll call from staff, please.
Member Wheeler?
Aye.
Member Jacobson?
Aye.
Member Miles is absent. Member Rockwell?
Aye.
Member Crow is absent. Member Fultz?
You're muted.
That's Rockwell.
Yes.
Thank you. And Chair Porter?
Yes, aye.
Okay, that motion passes.
All right, that brings us up to the group favorite, at least as far as I'm concerned, the state of the utility.
Good evening, Chairman Wendell, Porter, and members of the UAV. Been one of those long days. Sorry about that.
Yeah, same here.
Tom Brown, the Chief Operating Officer for GRU. I know the schedule for tonight is extremely full, and in that respect, I think everybody has the package for the report for the month, and I think I'd just like to address any questions there may be relative to the operational update. If not, we'll move on.
I didn't have any questions on that.
It was a pretty straightforward month. Production was a little bit down from last year, apart from the pandemic, which is what we're seeing across the board on most of our services. I think BFA may actually even have an update relative to what the impact has been so far.
Well, I'm doing my job, my best to help. We've had to move all of our offices here at the house, and so all that stuff's going. So my household bill's going up. So I'm trying to help.
There you go. Much appreciated.
Okay, no questions on that. Then we need to move on to new business, and that starts out our budget discussion.
Mr. Chair, before we start, I have a question of staff, if I may.
Yes, go ahead, Member Wheeler.
This afternoon, we received a press notice. GRU proposes no rate increases for fiscal year 2021. Was that press release already sent out?
Yes, it was, Member Wheeler.
Then I would ask a straightforward question. Why are we having a presentation and discussing this if we've already announced that we're proposing no rate increases? Just a rhetorical question.
Oh, well, no, we're giving you several options. We just feel it's important at this time of crisis in the community to, recommend from GRU's perspective, zero increase.
If I may be direct, the timing of that release puts into question the validity of our discussions tonight. It's as though it were a fait accompli, as it were. I would have preferred that not happen right before this discussion. I'll be polite and I'll sit and listen, but sounds like it's not really, we have much to say in the matter at this point, but thank you. I appreciate that.
Oh, well, I'd like to address that. I mean, I think, that's certainly, it wasn't to impact certainly the advisory role of the UAB. If you remember, there was a lot of not furor, but there was some news reports that GRU was just going to be coming in, recommending rate increases, doing all this other stuff. And, what it was us saying there's a whole host of options at this point, but we are recommending a zero increase. And I think you have the right and absolute duty to ask us why we're doing that. And, I apologize if that puts you in a disadvantage. That certainly wasn't the intent of doing that. But you can ask us, tough questions like, what the heck you doing there, Bolarski?
Okay, thanks for that comment, Member Wheeler, and answer, Ed, from my cheap seat. The way things are going at my job, I'm just happy each day I can show up with matching clothes. So
I don't always pull that off.
Yeah, I'm not standing up right now, so we're not going to go anywhere. So, okay, so we're off to new business, and that is the budget discussion. And again, I don't mean to make light of Member Wheeler's comments, not at all on that. But I do feel that some of the things we're dealing with are kind of jammed in there unnecessarily because this bug that's running rampant in our world.
I'm here.
Mr. Larky, are you going to introduce Mr. Benton, or do you want him just to pick up and go?
Oh, I'm sorry. Was that me? Did you?
Yes, we don't have Ms. Rasnick here with us tonight, so I didn't know if you wanted to perhaps give an introduction to Mr. Benton.
Yeah, well, and I will do that. But, Mark Benton, quite frankly, is a man that needs no introduction. Mark Benton is basically an icon of city government in Gainesville, and we are just actually absolutely lucky to have him, as one of our valued employees. And I'm having a little fun with this, but it truly is the case. To have a 1-2 team of Claudia Rasnick and Mark Benton is a luxury that a lot of organizations don't have. And tonight, Claudia is having some personal issues that keep her from being here. And in certain situations, you'd be uncomfortable having the number 2 guy, report, on something like this. And I have all the faith in the world in Mark Benton. So with that, Mark, why don't you take it away? And don't screw up, okay?
Okay, I appreciate that, Ed. Thanks for the lead in, and I'm going to apologize up front for you guys having to listen to the second string. Ms. Rasnick was going to give this presentation, but I'm going to do my best to mumble through it and give y'all at least some comic relief, particularly after Ed pumped it up so high. So I'm going to try to share my screen at least briefly. Can y'all see that?
Yes.
Yes. Yep, we're good.
Okay. As y'all are aware, we have scheduled and rescheduled and rescheduled again on these budget meetings. And so unfortunately what that's resulted in is you're gonna see 5 pieces of the budget tonight. We're gonna start off, I'm gonna turn this over to Patrice Caffley and Eric Walters. They're gonna talk about the fuels budget. And then I'm gonna come back and give you the preliminary budget presentation. Both of these pieces were presented to the City Commission on May 28th. Following me, Todd Camhood is going to come on and talk about his customer and sales forecast. I'm going to then come back and do the secondary budget presentation, which contains the general manager's recommendation. And then Todd's going to follow up with the rate compares, if in fact that's necessary after this piece. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Patrice and Eric, and they're going to talk to you about the fuels budget.
Okay, I'll go ahead and put that up. I think you have to stop sharing, Mark. Okay, thanks.
Hopefully I've now stopped sharing my screen.
Okay, go ahead, Eric.
Thank you, Patrice. So Chair, members, my name is Eric Walters. I'm the Admin and Fuels Operations Director for GRU. Myself, along with Patrice Caffley, we're going to be presenting the fuels baseline budget overview. So hopefully you'll find this informative, and we'll be able to answer any questions that you have. Next slide, please. So I'm going to take the first part. I'm going to go through generation model, talk about economic dispatch, talk about our modeling process, and then I'm going to turn over to Patrice, and she's going to go through the fuels budget overview, methodology, processes, and basically how the sausage is made. At the end of the presentation, we'll give you the projected fuels budget for 2021, and we'll be able to answer any questions along the way that you may have. Next slide, please. So when we talk about fuels, you really have to start with a concept of economic dispatch. And what does that mean? So if you look at FERC, it basically defines it as the operation of generation facilities to produce energy at the lowest cost and reliably serve customers. It recognizes any operational limits generation and transmission facilities may have during that process. Next slide, please. So before we get into economic dispatch, you've got to really get an understanding of how we get there. And it starts off with a load, really. And what you see before you is typical curves for the 4 seasons that Gainesville sees as far as electric load throughout the system. So let's start with the yellow line, which is the winter day. So a typical winter day is, let's say it's 35 degrees, which would probably be front page news in the Gainesville Sun. But if you had a low of 35 degrees, you typically see people waking up, turning on heaters, turning on lights, getting ready for work. I guess this is pre-COVID or post-COVID, let's call it. And getting ready for work, and they head off to work. You see a dip in the middle of the day. You see a slight rise again in the evening as folks get home, start cooking dinner, start watching their favorite TV show, that kind of thing. If you move next to the spring day, you'll see it's a fairly flat line. There's not a lot of movement either way. I'm sorry. Okay. So in the spring, there's not a lot of movement either way. So you'll typically lows in the 50s, highs in the 70s. So you'll see kind of that curve. People wake up, it slowly climbs throughout the day. You see a little bump in the evening again, folks getting home and turning on and doing their evening activities. If you move to the summer day, which is the green line, you'll see this sinusoidal curve. Ed loves that word, so I'll make sure I throw it in at any opportunity I have. So you see,
you say it right every time too. I can't do it.
I practice it, Ed, just for you.
Sinusoidal. Is that it? Is that better?
Sinusoidal. Yes.
Oh, you're better than I am.
So you see this sinusoidal curve. And during the summertime, which we're in right now, you see a lull in the morning, and then you will see a peak in the afternoon, where you see a increase in the temperature. You also see a steady incline as the temperature goes up. AC load goes up, and then you'll see at the evening after peak, 10:30, 11 o'clock, it starts to go back down, and you start that cycle all over again.
Excuse me, Mr. Walters, we cannot see your screen now. We don't have the presentation up.
Okay. I was not sharing, so there we go.
There we go. Thank you.
All right. Okay, so that was a summer day, and you'll see that sinusoidal curve days on end as we go through that same pattern. And then the black line is a fall day. Again, in the morning, you'll see a slight increase. You see a slight decrease as you go throughout the day. And then again, a bump in the evening where folks get home, start cooking dinner, again, starting their evening activities, whatever they do. And then you start the process all over again. And I think the real point here is number one, a couple points. Number one is the difference between the shapes of the curves, depending on the time of year. And also number two, the magnitude of the curves. On a spring day, you'll have a range of about 100 megawatts that you have to deal with. On a summer day, you have a range of about 200 to 220 megawatts that you have to deal with. And your generation fleet has to be matched to all of those to be able to meet them as economically as possible and as flexibly as possible. So that's what we're really dealing with when we're talking about fuels and meeting that demand, is being able to put ourselves in a position to meet all of those curves and all of those demands at any time of the year, and also have some contingency as well. Next slide, please. So before we get into economic dispatch, let's talk about a few key terms first. The first is unit commitment. And basically it's a schedule of the most effective generation to meet a load forecast. So I'm basically picking the units I'm going to run for that day to meet that load. The next term is average net operating heat rate, or ANH, as I call it for short. And it's a common measure of system efficiency for a generating unit. How efficient it is, if you think about it in relation to a car, it's a miles per gallon, or an efficiency measure. The next term is incremental heat rate, and that's the change in fuel or heat input per change in output or megawatts. And so how much fuel do I need to put into a unit to get 1 more megawatt out of that same unit? That's the measure of an incremental heat rate, and that is very crucial in determining how units are loaded up throughout the day to meet the load. And then last, as you see, startup and shutdown cost. Obviously, as you start up a unit, it takes fuel, it takes power, you're spinning things up from a dead stop. And so There's a cost associated with that, and that also must be factored in when you're talking about the overall cost of running that unit. Next slide, please. So let's talk about the modeling process. You start with a load for a defined period. It could be anywhere from hours to weeks or years, months, years, whatever it is. But the modeling process is still the same. You define that load data for that defined period, and then you select which available generating units you have for that study period. There may be times where a unit is in a planned outage, and so obviously while it's in that planned outage, you can anticipate getting power from that unit. So those things must be factored in. You also have to recognize each unit's modeling limits, how fast it can ramp up or change load, the maximum and the minimum input or output for that unit. All those things must be factored in. Also the cost of generating, which depends on the heat rate, as we spoke of before. Any variable operating cost, that's fuel and non-fuel. Variable cost of environmental compliance, any reagents that you may use if you're injecting urea or ammonia, those costs are factored in. If you're using lime or some kind of limestone to remove emissions, those things all must be factored into the cost, as well as the startup cost. Now, when you're talking about economic dispatch, we have to know that fixed costs are never included in those. So any fixed O&M charges, any debt service, anything like that is never included in economic dispatch. And the next slide, we'll kind of go through what that reasoning is and how we get there. So the idea is say we're traveling from Gainesville to the Grand Canyon, and what cost are you going to consider for that? Okay, so you may, if you keep clicking for me, you may include fuel cost. Which car or which vehicle are you going to drive? If I drive an F-150, it's going to give me a different fuel cost to get from Gainesville to the Grand Canyon than if I drive a Prius or a smaller vehicle, right? Those fuel costs are going to be different, but I have to factor those in. Any maintenance that I have to have, do I need an oil change? Do I need to rotate my tires? Do I need to fix something else to make sure that I can get there and back safely? We'll consider those costs. Lodging, how many nights are you staying? Well, coming from Florida, they may actually quarantine you for 14 days before letting you go. So you may want to factor that cost in, but assuming we're not in that, how many nights are you staying? Are you staying in a hotel? Or are you, staying in an RV? Are you staying with friends? You've got to factor that cost in, as well as the food. If you're not bringing all of your food with you, how much do you expect to spend per meal for everybody in your family? If I was going to consider that, those were the costs that I would kind of factor into what's it going to cost me to go from Gainesville to the Grand Canyon and then come back. So let's talk a little bit about fixed cost. Say I still have a car note or I have a loan outstanding on my car. Am I going to factor in my payment for that time that I'm gone? Probably not, because I'm going to pay that anyway, right? Whether I go to the Grand Canyon or not, that's the cost I still have to incur. What about my mortgage payment? If I'm gone for 3 weeks, I wish you got a break or a discount from your mortgage company, but unfortunately it doesn't work that way. You still have to pay your mortgage during that time period. So those are fixed costs that you wouldn't necessarily throw into a cost of a trip from Gainesville to the Grand Canyon, but they are costs that you incur. Through the same mindset, it's the same with economic dispatch. You don't include fixed costs into your economic dispatch model, because those are effectively costs you're going to pay no matter what. Okay. So let's look at the modeling process a little closer. You have a load forecast and you have an average net operating heat rate that's used to create the unit commitment. That tells me which units I should be running. Okay. What units have the megawatt generating range. And again, going back to those curves that we saw earlier, you need different units and different ranges for a spring day versus a summer day, because I have a range of 100 megawatts in the spring. I have a range of 220 megawatts in the summer. Okay. So you've got to factor those things in. You've also got to factor in your ramp rates and your response time. That's got to be considered. And throwing in a Tesla Roadster versus a Prius. And I think you get 0 to 60 in a Tesla Roadster in what, 2 seconds, 2.5 seconds? 0 to 60 in a Prius is never. It's just you're always trying to get there, right? There's a different thing, but you trade off that efficiency for the power or the quick acceleration. Those are the same considerations that you make when you're talking about generating units and ramp rates. Once your unit is online, then the incremental heat rate determines how the units are loaded. And the next slide, I'll kind of walk through an example of what that means. So let's look at an incremental cost decision. You're looking at incremental cost at units at a minimum load. Let's say we have a combined cycle on CC1, and it costs $14.80 a megawatt hour. Deerhaven 2 is on, and it costs $23.70, and DHR is $19.25. These are all completely made up numbers, by the way. So no public records request on where we got those, completely made up for this example. So if we're going to do this, then if we need one more megawatt, where do we get the next most economical megawatt? And with unanimous response to this, CC1, because that unit is the next cheapest megawatt. And say we ramp up, so we ramp up and take CC1 to its to the maximum output, let's call it 100 megawatts, and then we still need further megawatts from there. Well, I'm going to take the next least expensive megawatt, which is going to be DHR, and I'm going to ramp that up. And if I still need more, I'm going to take DH2 after that. And then when the load starts to subside, I'm going to go in the opposite direction because I want to minimize my cost, right? So I take the most expensive megawatts and I start ramping them down first, next most expensive, and so on. And that's how you basically manage on a minute by minute or megawatt by megawatt basis, trying to minimize that cost. You're comparing the incremental cost of each unit based versus the number of megawatts that you need. Next slide, please. So we don't do these things on the back of an envelope. Some folks use some pretty fancy spreadsheets, but when we do these, we typically use a program. Most of you have heard the name of GenTrader, and it is an energy model that determines the most economical scenario. It's used for unit commitment and long-term planning, and it's also what we call a deterministic model. There are other models out there that use different things. But deterministic means that it gives you one answer, which it deems as the most economical or the lowest cost. There are some other models out there that kind of do a stochastic model, which is basically it varies fuel up and down, it varies your load up and down, and gives you kind of a probability curve and tells you you'll probably end up somewhere in here, okay? So nothing right or wrong. Both of them should end up right in about the same spot, but it does give you a different look on those. But for our purposes, we use GenTrader, and we use a deterministic model to do that. Next slide. So what kind of things go into it? If you start from the top left, obviously all of the unit data goes in. You need to know your heat rate curves. You need to know your up and down limits. You need to know your variable O&M cost, forced outage rates, min and max up and down times. Those kind of things have to go in just from a technical standpoint of what you decide to do. You also need fuel data, which is going to be the bulk of your cost, but nonetheless, you need to put them in. And you get, obviously, coal, gas, whatever pricing that you need has to go into those. Any purchase power contracts or sales. So in our case, something like G2 would be a factor. Solar Fit would be a factor. And any market opportunities that you have and the price of those markets, as well as your load data, which we talked about at the beginning of this presentation. What is your load forecast for that time period? What GenTrader does is take it and it gives you the cheapest option to match that. And so that output is given on whatever time period that you requested. It gives you megawatt hours produced. It gives you fuel consumption, your fuel expense, variable O&M estimation, all of those things. And an export of that would give you any exports to Excel and allow you to either manipulate, analyze that data further if you need to. In that case, what we're looking at is a purely economic model. So reliability is kind of factored in on the human side. the idea is to model how you run or run how you model. And so we're constantly making small tweaks and small changes to the model to try and more closely replicate what we actually do in real life, and vice versa. So I believe that's the end of my slides, but going on to the next slide. So Patrice Cathway is going to introduce or go through the methodology of what goes into that model and then talk you through the numbers at the end. So Patrice, I'll turn it over to you.
And I'm going to give an overview of how the fuels budget is constructed and how that translates into the fuel budget that you'll see later on. I will briefly cover the methodology and the process for constructing the fuel budget, and then I will give a brief snapshot of the different expense components for the major fuel types. And lastly, I will show you the summary of the FY21 budget and a brief comparison to our current fiscal year. Okay, so each forecast has mainly two components for each commodity type, price and volume. Volume does not come into play as much if it's a service-related expense, but these are generally lower dollar value items on the budget. Our prices is mainly a hybrid of internal contract pricing terms, as well as independent market projections. And I'll go through some examples of these. The contracts, we will have commodity, transportation, or service contracts. Commodity contracts may include, for example, coal, pebble lime, fly ash, and we'll have transportation contracts, for example, like rail contracts that brings in coal from Central Appalachia, as well as pipeline transportation that brings the gas into our market area from the production areas in Texas and Louisiana. The industry publications that we generally utilize are, for example, Argos Gas Daily and a Platts Coal Daily, as well as other independent publications such as from PIRA and Woods Mackenzie. The main federal agency that we utilize information from is the Energy Information Administration, and they will collate a lot of data that's submitted to them from utilities and other agencies, and they have periodic publications which is publicly available. Indices that we typically utilize, for example, the NYMEX, which as it relates to natural gas, and that's the New York Mercantile Exchange. Other indices will include, for example, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, where we'll pull, for example, the Producer Price Index, the Consumer Price Index, as well as other individual commodity indices that we use to extrapolate to forecast, to make longer forecasts. On the volume side, for the major commodity type, the volume is an output from the generation model, as Eric mentioned. But for our manual forecast, we utilize other methods. We will utilize volume drivers, as well as historical data and period averages. Volume drivers are typically utilized when there's a direct correlation between line items. For example, the amount of fly ash that's generated would be directly related to the amount of coal that is consumed. And the amount of pebble lime, for example, that we will consume will be heavily dependent on the level of SO2 in the coal that we anticipate we're going to burn. We also utilize a lot of historical data that we've captured throughout the years and data averages from different periods. And a good example of that is our LDC volumes. LDCs from our local distribution company. So this is retail gas utilized by our residential and commercial customers. So here you'll see 5 years of data from 2014 to 2018, and those are represented by the dotted line. Here I would calculate a 3-year average and a 5-year average to see which one represents a typical year. Here I've selected a 3-year average that's represented by that solid green line. And the idea is that we will eliminate any anomalies that we're not expected to reoccur. Here you'll see that we have eliminated all the dips and spikes from all the individual years. And this is how we would help to predict our consumption for that LDC volume. So the first step in each modeling cycle is to forecast the delivered commodity prices of the major fuel types. And this is one of the main inputs that goes into that computer generation model that Eric mentioned, and that determines how the units are dispatched. We will do short-term forecast, if we're doing a short-term study, or for example, for our budget forecast. This will typically be a 1 to 2, and sometimes even a 5-year period. We will extrapolate that data using the different methods I mentioned earlier for example, a 10-year forecast that we use in our 10-year site plan, which is submitted annually to the Public Service Commission, or we've forecast 20 years of expenses and generation for resource planning of our generation fleet. Okay, and purchase power is generally prices are from the energy authority, which provides back office services to us, as well as optimizing a lot of the assets that GRU has. I'm going to now go into the different components or the different expenses for that we incur for burning each fuel type for generation. And I'll start out with the biomass. On the biomass side, of course, we incur the costs associated with the commodity. So that's the cost of those wood chips delivered to the plant. There's also a fee that we pay to a local company that we have retained that performs all the purchasing, maintain the fuel supply, and manage the delivery of that fuel. We also incur expenses related to environmental commodities for SO2 and NOx control. Currently, we are not utilizing sodium bicarbonate as we have in previous years, because the SO2 level in the fuel, the biomass fuel, is so low that it's not a necessary expense to meet our permit requirements. As with any solid fuel, byproducts are generated from the combustion process, and we incur expenses associated with transporting and disposal of that bottom ash and fly ash. Miscellaneous expenses we incur, examples of those are, for example, lab maintenance. So there's a small lab at the plant where we perform periodic testing for ash as well as moisture. And there are several surveys and audits related to fuel that takes place throughout the year. Last but not least, there's diesel fuel expenses that are utilizing the equipment that's used for pile maintenance. Similarly, or other solid fuel for coal, there are similar type expenses. There's the cost of the commodity, the cost of transportation, getting that fuel from the Central Appalachian region to the plant. Similar environmental commodities for SO2 and NOx control. Currently, we don't utilize urea, as we had a capital project where we installed low NOx burners, and that was able to help us meet permit requirements and not incur this expense on an ongoing basis. We also have combustion byproducts, fly ash, as well as a scrubber byproduct, which is the lime byproduct after it has absorbed all that SO2. There's also expenses related to rail car maintenance, and essentially that's a garage that we have on site. We have hired an outside entity that does rail car maintenance. By doing that, we have reduced the expenses if compared to if CXX, which is our rail carrier, pulls those cars out after inspection and does any maintenance on them. Miscellaneous expenses will include taxes. Every state and every county that the train passes through from Central Appalachia to the plant, they record that mileage, and we pay taxes to those states and counties annually. There's also costs associated with price analyses, which I mentioned those we utilize for forecasting and for managing contracts. There's also quality analyses that we pay for. Every train that comes from the mines to the plant, a sample is taken, an analysis is performed to make sure that we're getting exactly what we pay for. It's matching all the quality specs that we have specified, and we receive those before the train is unloaded. And just similarly with biomass, there's an inventory audit that takes place every year, and diesel for pile maintenance. On the natural gas side, there's the commodity. Again, this is the gas itself, and then transportation from the production region to our market area and to the different gate stations we have in Gainesville. Some of that transportation will be firm, which means we have that transportation under contract, or it will be non-firm, so we buy that on the market on a day-ahead basis. There's also charges associated with using that transportation, and also a fuel charge associated, which essentially is what the pipeline charges us to run the different compressor stations along the pipeline into our market area. Typically, we don't have long-term baseload contracts, but we do buy some baseload volume for natural gas a month ahead of time. We are able to receive a discount by buying this fixed amount ahead of time for every day of the upcoming month. There's also small hedging expense, some hedging expenses that we incur, and these have been typically smaller, as we generally utilize option instruments to hedge our natural gas and cap those prices. And those expenses would be related only to the premiums that we expend to put those hedges on. And again, price analyses for those publications that provides us with market data and market information on different activities in the market. On the purchase power side, the Energy Authority, as I mentioned, will do trading for us. We will purchase power from the open market, either on an hourly, day ahead basis, or sometimes a block purchase if we know there is an outage coming up on one of the units, to be able to cover that load or to be able to recover our reserves. There's also the cost of our solar generation. Much of that is under contract, and same with G2, that is under contract, and that's a contract fixed price as well. There's also costs associated with the sale of renewable energy credits. This essentially is a market participation cost. We have to pay a subscription fee for each asset that we maintain on a registry. And there's a fee associated with either retiring those credits or to transfer those credits to a buyer. So on to our budget for FY21. The total cost of generation is $66.6 million. And for purchase power, it's just shy of $16 million. The total that goes towards fuel adjustment is $82.6 million. Our LDC cost is projected to be roughly $7 million. And so the total for that upcoming fiscal year is $89.6 million. This is about $130,000 less than the previous or current fiscal year. When you compare that also for the following year, FY22, we are at $85.8 million. This is $3.7 million lower than FY21. And I think the major reason for that is in FY22, we will lose the load that we are currently have for supplying Alachua with power. And that is all from me. If there's any questions, we're happy to take those.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes, Member Wheeler, go ahead.
For these models, you've been modeling the expected demand, expected supply based on 3-year to 5-year averages, and use GenTrader to model that. We're probably going to see a significant downturn in consumption and demand in the next year. How's that going to affect your models and your modeling? Significant reduction due to COVID.
So I'll take that one. What we typically do is we have our load forecast from Todd Kamler, who is our forecaster here within GRU. For his analysis, he takes into account expected load growth, those kind of things going forward. So what we do is we're using an end product into the model. The good thing about that is that what you're seeing here is a snapshot. It is a snapshot based on fuel prices and load models as of what we knew back in February. The thing that you can bet on is that as soon as we wrote it down, it was wrong. And so what we do is that we take that model, that GenTrader model, and we do what we call a 12-month rolling, which updates the next 12 months of generation in the forecast for our generation fleet. So any load forecast that we see that may change, or any anomalies or anything that is shifting, would hopefully get caught up in that. So what you're seeing now is, again, just a snapshot. We manage on a more a shorter timeline, anywhere from 7 to 10 days from the weekly forecast. And every month we do the 12-month rolling look at the next 12 months and what it may look like with updated fuel prices and load forecasts as they're available. So to answer your question, in the snapshot, it is what it was back in February. When we do those 12-month rollings, as we get any updates in that load forecast, and they're incorporated into that.
Hey, Eric, I would add that there's, you have to remember that this fuel adjustment is a pass-through to the customers as well. So whatever that fuel is it gets passed through. It's not a decision as part of the base rate. So it's not a function of going to the UAB or to the City Commission to get approval on what that pass-through will be. So if it comes in lower, that fuel adjustment will be driven lower by that very analysis that Eric is talking about. So it will be adjusted through the normal course of business if it were to come in lower.
Okay, I've got a quick question, pretty simple, because I think I just missed it, an explanation to Patrice. And don't bother sharing the screen again, but on slide 14, you've got the LDC curves. On the y-axis, there's no units on that. What are the units on that? It's like 150,000, 200,000, 250,000.
Those would be MMBTUs, so million
Gotcha.
BTUs.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Okay, sorry about that.
No problem. No problem.
Yeah,
Mr.
that will
Chair,
be on your, that will be on your review, Patrice.
When does
we have
G2?
a couple of hands raised there, Member Foltz and Member Jacobson.
Okay. Member Foltz, if you want to take your question there.
Sure. I just had a question regarding the FIT contracts. I was wondering if it would be feasible and impactful for the utility to buy out the feed-in tariff contracts for anybody that was willing.
Yeah, I would mention, Member Foltz, that we've looked at that in the past, but buying out a contract right now would incur additional debt, and quite frankly, we haven't seen any ability to do that economically at this point. Or maybe, I mean, we could look at it again, but at the present time, we haven't seen anything.
Okay, yeah, I just wondered if, particularly given what's going on with the economy right now, if there might be people that would be open to taking a lump sum payment now and just going back to net metering, basically. So anyway, I just was wondering about that. Thank you.
Okay. And then we had Member Wheeler, I think, had a hand up, and then somebody else did too.
Not I.
Oh, okay. And who was the other person?
Member Jacobson.
Oh, Barry. Yeah. Member Jacobson, are you still on board? And then Member Crow also, but I think Barry is not responding. Member Crow, did you have a question?
Yeah. What does G2 mean?
That is the landfill facility in Marion County that we get that, is it methane gas from?
Yes,
Yeah.
landfill gas.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and G2 is just the name of the company that provides that power. It doesn't stand for anything that I know of.
All right.
Could I ask a question now?
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Barry.
Thank you. So my question is, hold on, I'm getting a echo. Okay. Can you, hold on, sorry about that. So my question is, could we add to your model a value of CO2 release? So basically, what's the externalities of that?
So we've looked at modeling that and taken into account the impact. Unfortunately, there's no way that we can see right now with the existing models that we have to factor that in. It would just be on a purely speculative basis at this point. And so we currently don't include any impact of emissions or a cost of emissions or credits or what have you.
So when you say you can't add it in, does it mean you don't know the values to use, or the model doesn't have the ability to say, I'm going to add this factor for this?
That the model requires an additional module that we don't currently have. So if we had that module, it would incur an extra cost to get it. If we had that module, we could plug those prices in, but they would be, it would just be a number that pops out basically. So we could add those up, and right now we do kind of an estimation based on estimated tons from the emissions reports that we produce. So we haven't seen the value of expending the extra capital to add that module when we use our projections and actual values from our emissions to kind of calculate a cost.
Sure. Well, I mean, the value would be that it could shift your fuel blending away from a CO2 producer to a more environmentally friendly option. That would be the value. Any idea what the cost of the module would be?
It's been a few years since we researched it. I'd have to get an updated price.
Okay. I mean, I don't know if you have orders of that. Are we talking $1,000, 10,000, 100,000?
The last time I checked, and this is again memory from 5 years ago, it was less than 100,000. Probably somewhere in the 40 or 50,000 range.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Can I understand more what you're saying, Member Jacobson? Could you add a little flavor to that?
Sure, sure. So what you're doing now is you're saying, okay, what's the absolute economic best fuel to use? And correct me if I'm wrong about any of this. And it's this blending of these plants with these fuels. If you added a cost of CO2 into that, that could shift the blend. You may say, oh, let's do the biomass a little more because it's not having the CO2 release of, Deer Haven 2. And so it may not have a major effect, or it may really move the needle in terms of our decision making. We're saying that to us in this community, release of CO2 is bad. And so there may be a cost to that, but what is that cost that you can incorporate into the model?
Yeah, I think that's one of the problems we've had with it in the past is that, quite frankly, there isn't a cost to the utility of that CO2.
Right.
There's certainly, I would not argue at all that there isn't a universal worldly cost to that, but it's not one that's incurred by the utility.
Understood. Yeah, it would mean running at something that's not optimal from the utility from a purely economic point of view. And I do understand that it's kind of that'd be more of a community, decision of, in the same way feed and tariff, some of the other stuff, decisions have been made, not just purely from the direct economics, but for the broader environmental economic viewpoint.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
If Barry was done.
I am done. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Barry. Sorry. Yeah, go ahead, Member Wheeler.
Just as a follow-up to Barry's comments, I would request that staff come back to us with a cost estimate for adding that module. The tragedy of the commons externalities, I know, are not a direct profit loss margin concern for the utility, but this community has expressed strong concerns for those externalities. So if we could at least have some estimate, as Barry is saying, that you have this module, we can have idea, and maybe it's worth paying a couple extra cents to go through a different fuel mix if it means reducing that amount of carbon. So I would like to follow up at a future meeting on adding that module to generator. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll have my 2 cents worth in. That might be a good thing to have in your back pocket because if there is a change in administration, there might be some move to a carbon pricing rather sooner rather than later. And so that might change all the economics that Barry and Wes are commenting about. So that might be something to think about in the near future.
Chair.
Yeah, go ahead. Who is that?
This is Tim.
Tim. Yeah, go ahead.
I just want. I'm just curious. I mean, I think I know the answer, but is the 50 megawatts of solar power that in the pending power purchase agreement, I would assume that's included under the purchase power section of the model budget.
Yes, when you look at that, it's not included in the 2 years that we presented to you because obviously the time frame is starting in 2023. But yes, any purchases from that would be included in the purchase power section.
Thank you.
All right. Maybe time to move on. Do we have another presentation? I think we do.
Well, the master of ceremonies here is Mark Benton, so I guess he's the one that's going to drive us toward, I think, a presentation about forecasts from Todd Kamhout. Is that correct, Mr. Benton?
No, that's not right, Mr. Bolarski.
That's not the first time I've heard that.
I tried to be gentle.
That was nice. I have a very fragile ego.
The next presentation is the preliminary presentation that we provided to the City Commission on May 28th. So I'm going to try to share my screen here and move into that.
I would say that, I'm probably jumping the gun on some of this because I was thinking about Mr. Kamhout. I don't know that you're aware, but he will be retiring, before the end of July. So this will be the last time you'll have a chance to, put him under that bright light of sunshine and quiz him relentlessly about his numbers and why the heck he came up with such, low growth numbers and rates that he's talking about. So think about it, before this next presentation. so that you can get all the nasty questions that you want together to really grill him on his last, budget meeting for the UAB.
I would like to ask, I'm assuming that the host of this meeting has the ability to mute Mr. Bolarski, so if before we go any further, we could do that. I think that'd be beneficial to many of us.
I might break our rule and use the chat to ask for that in a minute, but
as I said before, this is the preliminary presentation that the City Commission received on May 28th. we're going to talk first a little bit about fiduciary responsibility. GRU has multiple stakeholders that are external to the organization, the commission, the UAB, our customers, bondholders. And we have responsibilities to each of these that are significant, and to some degree they're interconnected. To the commission and the UAB, obviously we've got the responsibility maintain the health of the utility, protect our credit ratings, to provide the safe and reliable capital infrastructure and services, and also, just as importantly, to return our profits to general government, that is in the form of the general fund transfer, which is the last payment we make after all other items are paid. To our ratepayers and taxpayers, we essentially have the same set. I'm not going to go through them again. It's the same set of responsibilities that I just spoke to on the commission and the board side. And then to our bondholders, we have the responsibility to maintain the financial health of the utility. And essentially, at the end of the day, all that flows into our ability to pay back the funds that are loaned for capital infrastructure.
Excuse me, Mr. Benton. Mr. Benton, this is Robin Baxley. Did you mean to share your screen?
I thought I had.
No.
I would have said something, Mark, but I was muted.
Thank you, Mr. Pawlowski. Robin, do you want to go ahead? From where I'm sitting, I've shared it. You may want to take over for me and sharing the screen.
Sure. Which one of the presentations are we on?
We are on the UAB first presentation, July 9th, 2020. We're on slide 6.
First presentation, I think it was that one, the first one.
And slide 6.
Yes. No, you're sharing.
Not yet. Oh.
Share, see up there what says share?
No, that's for different going. Pardon me.
Maybe just hit the up button. That right there. Okay, it says we're sharing. Okay, can you all see that now?
Yep.
Great.
Go for it, Mark.
Okay. So we're on slide 6. I just spoke about the responsibility to the bondholders, and like I said, ultimately our responsibility to them is to pay back the funds that they've loaned us for capital infrastructure, and that's going to essentially flow into the next piece of this. So if you could go to the next slide, Robin. That's it. Are we on the next slide, Robin?
I think that's 8. Weren't we on 6? Oh, there you go.
We're on 8.
This slide is number 7 in the materials you sent out.
Okay, it says it's the debt slide.
Yeah.
Okay, if we could go on to number 8. I'm having trouble because I can't see how Robin's moving. So I'm assuming we've moved on to slide 8.
Yeah, you have the one that shows the 1.9 million going down to the 1.6 million debt.
Yeah, our debt load is always a matter of some discussion, and rightfully so. 1.9 billion. It's fairly high for a utility with our customer base, but I wanted to point out, if you look over the last 5 years, we've actually reduced that outstanding principal by about $277 million, or 14% since 2014. So next slide, Robin.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Robin. As you're aware, GRU management came to the City Commission last October and asked for authorization to execute a number of potential transactions, and was contingent upon market conditions becoming viable. The Commission granted that authorization, as did the UAB, and over a period of 6 months, we completed 7 transactions. And the strategy behind these transactions was to execute restructurings which, without increasing or extending principal, would result in reduced interest expense. We then utilized that cash flow from the reduced interest expense to accelerate the redemption of existing principal, reducing our outstanding debt faster than the existing amortization schedule, and thus reducing interest payments. Next slide, Robin.
Okay.
This table represents the interest savings by year that's generated from those restructurings completed to date. It's about $134 million over 30 years. We are currently working with our financial advisor, PFM, to identify the specific bond series and maturities that we will redeem with these funds. Next slide.
Okay.
Over the past several years, while we reduced this outstanding principal and worked through the restructurings, we've managed to make progress in de-risking the debt portfolio as well. This chart shows from 2017 forward, we've increased the percentage of our debt that is either fixed or synthetically fixed from just under 87% to just below 94%. Next slide.
Okay.
So moving on to credit ratings and ratios. Since the beginning of the calendar year, we've had interactions with all 3 rating agency organizations. Moody's was simply an exchange of updated financial ratios and audited financial information as of September 30, 2019, but both Fitch and S&P conducted full rating reviews. They took analyses to their credit committees for evaluation, and they issued rating actions. And Fitch's process included an on-site visit with GRU management and a tour of the DHR facility. Next slide, please, Robin.
Okay.
As I said, Moody's took no rating action. They simply issued a communication that our rating was still at the AA level at AA3. In March, Fitch released a rating action affirming our debt at A+, and in May, S&P affirmed our AA rating with a stable outlook. Next slide.
Okay.
In the spirit of full disclosure, while no ratings changed, there were certain concerns that were common to all 3 organizations. As you can see here on the slide, high electric rates, high leverage, aging generation assets, a high GFT, and the absence of a GFT formula. And it was communicated clearly to staff that erosion in our financial ratios could result in potential downgrades. And S&P in particular went a little bit further and spoke to us about their concerns about what will happen in the local economy in the fall should we not have live classes at UF. And if that obviously, I believe UF has a plan to bring the students back, but if that doesn't come to fruition, we'll be having very serious discussions with S&P about the status of our rating. I'm sorry, next slide, Robin.
Okay.
This table lays out the trend over the last 5 years and some of our key metrics. All three rating agencies have different formulas for calculating ratios, and they all place different degrees of emphasis on different metrics. Fitch is obviously rates us the lowest of the three entities at A+, so we thought it would be fair to use their ratios in this presentation. As you can see, from 18 to 19, we improved in all of our ratios for two of these metrics, debt service coverage and days cash on hand. Our ratios are between their A+ and AA- medians. Our coverage of full obligations is above the AA median. Our days liquidity on hand is not only above the AA- median, but exceeds their AAA median as well. But you can see from our leverage ratio is well above the Fitch medians, although it has improved each year since fiscal 16. And Fitch places probably the highest degree of emphasis on this leverage ratio of any of the metrics that they look at. Next slide, please, Robin.
Okay.
So this next section shows how some of these things fit together. You can go to the next slide.
Okay.
Some of our fiduciary responsibilities include, obviously having adequate cash and reserves. We took a cash balance policy to the City Commission back in March of 2019. The Commission supported that policy, which states that we have to have our cash and reserves within certain ranges around a target, and if we don't, then we have to take action within a certain period of time to put them there. Next slide. Liquidity. As part of the 2019 restructuring, we converted all of our commercial paper to long-term fixed rate debt, which improved our liquidity ratios, as we just talked about a minute ago, considerably. Next slide.
Okay.
And all of these actions, all three of these actions, the cash balance policy, the 2019 restructurings, which spoke to debt defeasance and reducing near-term debt service expense, as well as bolstering our liquidity by freeing up the commercial paper capacity, were all very well received by the rating agencies and played a role in our keeping our ratings where they were. Next slide, please, Robin.
Okay.
And one more. These are the next steps.
Okay.
The June 16th date's already it's already moot. This, like I said, this was a May 28th presentation. That date didn't come to fruition. Obviously, we're having this discussion tonight with you on revenues and rate approvals. We will have this presentation with the rate presentation with the Commission Monday night. The next piece of this is on the general fund transfer formula. And I will ask you if you want to go through this process. When we made this presentation on May 28th, the Commission decided to move forward with a proposal from the general manager and the city manager to have an independent third-party consultant come in and work with us to determine what an appropriate general fund transfer formula would be. So the City Commission chose not to walk through the general fund transfer piece of this presentation, since, like I said, that's a kind of moot until we get that report back from this third-party process. We have put the RFP together. We've gotten with purchasing. It should be going out the door in July, and so we'll be working with general government as well as this consultant to put that together. If you'd like to see the GFT presentation, I'm glad to go through it with you, but I'm afraid it'd be a waste of your time, and I know you have a lot on your plate tonight.
I would recommend that we move past that because we'll just be seeing it again in a different form, unless we hear any complaints, or not complaints, just different opinions.
It's okay. I get complaints about my presentations all the time, Mr. Chair. It's fine.
I don't know where that would come from.
Yeah, I can't imagine. Might be from the gentleman that I've asked to mute, but other than that, no.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, you don't want to see this, Robin, if you could move on to slide 33.
Okay, we're there.
Okay, this is the wrap up, and if you can move on to 34.
Okay.
Both the commission, the board, and GRU have worked really hard to support a financially healthy utility for the last 2 years. We've taken steps to bolster our cash and reserves and to augment our liquidity in the event that cash reserves aren't adequate. Next slide, please, Robin.
Okay.
And we are working to maintain the strong credit ratings that we have today to keep our borrowing costs down. And like we just talked about, we are in the process of working on a multi-year formula that will meet the city's needs in terms of providing them the adequate resources to continue the service level delivery that they need, as well as being something that we can that makes sense that we can afford on the utility side. So that's everything for this particular segment of the presentation. Obviously, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. If not, I'm going to turn it over to Todd Kamhout. He is now going to do his customer and sales forecast. And of course, you can ask him any questions you want to, but you don't necessarily need to heed Mr. Olarski's advice to grill him, although this will be, he is retiring in 2 weeks. So this will be your opportunity to, as we are doing now, thank him for his esteemed service to this utility and the community.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Benton. I appreciate that presentation as always, and looking forward to hearing Todd coming up next.
Thank you. I've never had quite such an introduction. I'd like to try to share my screen here. Here we go. Let's see. So I hope that's working. And yeah. Good evening, everyone, Mr. Chair and members of the board. My name is Todd Kamhout, and I'm representing our rates and forecasting group. Each year, I develop a forecast of number of customers, unit sales, and revenues for the gas, water, wastewater, and electric systems. We also forecast peak loads for the electric, water, and wastewater systems. Our forecasts are used for multiple purposes. All of our forecasts span a 20-year horizon, which allows us to plan for retirements and additions to the generation fleet, or the water treatment plant well field, or wastewater treatment facilities. We submit projections to regulatory agencies such as the Florida Public Service Commission and NERC. An example that you heard about earlier is our 10-year site plan that we file annually with the PSC. Our budget planning process looks at monthly projections for fiscal 20 and 21 and annual projections all the way out through 2039. We also take the forecast down to the hourly level to make assessments of how best to optimize the dispatching of our generation units that you heard earlier. I'll talk a little bit first about methodology. We use economic, demographic, and climate data to develop mathematical relationships observed in our historical billing data. We do this using regression analysis on the SAS software platform. All the work is done in-house. Our forecasts are built from the bottom up meaning that we develop projections of number of customers and usage per customer for each similarly situated billing class, and then aggregate class sales up to totals for each system. Our forecasts are built on the data we collect from internal sources. We maintain databases that include decades of monthly billing history and system peak demands. We also use data from reputable independent sources. Population and household size estimates are published by the Bureau of Economic and Business Research at the University of Florida. We subscribe to an economic forecast from IHS Markit and use their projections of income and employment in our forecast equations. We also compile heating degree days, cooling degree days, and rainfall as reported to NOAA by the Flight Service Station at the Gainesville Regional Airport. Here's an example of how the bottom-up approach works in the development of the electric system forecast. The analysis begins down here at the customer and usage per customer level, then rolls up to energy sales for each respective customer class, then finally aggregates to total system sales. Peak demands are derived from total energy sales. The bottom-up approach came into play this year in the development of our COVID-19 forecast scenarios. We subjectively adjusted the number of customers and average usage per customer for each month from April through December, and allowed these estimates to flow back up through the forecasting process all the way through to revenues. I'll discuss the adjustments that were made to our forecasts in light of COVID-19 in more detail toward the end of this presentation. Population is one of the primary independent variables used in the development of our forecasts. This chart compares estimates for Alachua County versus the state of Florida. County population is shown on the left y-axis, and we have about 267,000 persons here in Alachua County. On the right y-axis, I'm showing the state of Florida population, which sits at about 21.2 million persons, both according to the Bureau of Economic and Business Research. Population grows faster for the state than here in our local area. And I point out that we are a regional community and many people travel into Alachua County to work, shop, and receive services. Forecasters love to talk about the weather. Degree days are another key variable in our forecasting work. Degree days are a measure of average daily temperature compared to a baseline of 65 degrees, and we typically sum them up for reporting by month and year. We use both cooling degree days and heating degree days in our electric forecast equations, and we use heating degree days in our natural gas models. You can see in the cooling degree data that 2018 and 19 were very warm years. And in the heating degree history, 2010 is an example of a very cold winter. Our forecasts are based on median levels from the past 10 years, which were warmer than 30-year historical averages. The premise behind the warming trend is that nighttime low temperatures have become warmer than before, more so than any notable change in daytime high temperatures. And in the climate world, the way the average temperature is defined is by taking the daily high minus the daily low and simply dividing by 2. Through our forecasting work, we've learned that rainfall during the months of March, April, and May does an excellent job of explaining historical variation in water usage per customer. This is because most of the variation in water usage is a function of irrigation requirements, and landscape irrigation requirements tend to be highest in spring. We use this variable in both our residential and commercial models. The average value for this variable is about 8.5 inches, which is the median from 1984 through 2019. You can see that historical variation in the rainfall data is much higher than it was in the degree day data. And there also, to the eye, to me, does not appear to be a short-term trend as there was with degree days. Okay, we'll now transition from methodology to results. This chart is showing our projection of combined non-fuel revenues for the next 10 years. in millions of dollars. These projections reflect the expected trajectory over time resulting from increases in number of customers and sales without any rate increases built in. The fiscal 20 data reflects 6 months of actual revenue. The green line represents our base case forecast prior to making any subjective adjustments to fiscal 20 and 21 for COVID-19 impacts. I'm going to give an overview of each system, and I'll start with the natural gas system. The gas system serves about 36,000 customers, and fewer than 2,000 are non-residential. We bill 4 different rate categories. The small commercial class and the commercial firm class are combined for purposes of developing the forecast. Energy sales are split about 36% residential, 40% combined commercial, and 24% large volume, respectively. This is the forecast of gas system revenues by sector or primary revenue source. Again, prices are held constant through this entire 10-year horizon. The gas system has about $16 million in annual non-fuel revenue available to meet its expenses. You can see that residential contributes the largest share, making the gas system the most seasonal of our 4 systems, and that's driven by winter heating loads. Non-residential customers also contribute a very significant share of total system revenues. The fiscal 20 data reflects 6 months of actual revenue, and this past winter was very mild, so sales will be lower for fiscal 20. Again, the green line represents our base case forecast prior to making the subjective adjustments to 20 and 21 for COVID-19 impacts. Here are some longer-term trends in the natural gas forecast. This table shows the 10-year average annual rate of change in number of customers, energy sales, and revenue for the natural gas system. We're showing the last 10 years of history and the first 10 years of our forecast. Number of customers are projected to grow at the same rate as they have over the last 10 years, roughly 0.8% per year. Usage per customer is expected to decline, but not as rapidly as it did historically. And revenue is projected to increase at about 0.4% per year. Please note that historical revenue includes the rate increases we implemented along the way, while the forecast is based on current prices and does not include any rate increases. Next, we'll move on to the water system. Our water system serves about 74,000 customers. We developed forecasts for these 3 customer groups, although there are some further delineations within each for billing purposes, such as domestic versus irrigation versus multiple family. In terms of volume, sales to residential customers make up about 60% of the total water sales, while non-residential sales account for 29%, and sales to UF make up the remaining 11%. This chart is showing the components of water system revenue. The forecast is based on current prices and does not include any rate increases. The water system has about $36 million from sales available to meet its expenses. Residential customers contribute over 60% toward total sales revenue. Again, the fiscal 20 data reflects 6 months actual revenue. We had a warm, dry spring, and that contributed to higher water sales this year. The green line, again, represents our base case forecast prior to making adjustments for COVID-19. These are some longer-term trends in the water forecast. This table shows the 10-year average annual rate of change in number of customers, thousands of gallons sold, and revenue for the water system. We're showing the last 10 years of history and the first 10 years of our forecast. Again, please note historical revenues include the rate increases we implemented along the way, while the forecast is based on current prices and does not include any rate increases. I'll now transition into the wastewater system. The wastewater system serves about 65,000 customers. Residential customers are billed for more than 2/3 of total system volumes. The sale of reclaimed water for irrigation use is a revenue within the wastewater system, as is the treatment of biosolids delivered to our plants by haulers. This chart shows our forecast of wastewater system revenue by customer segment. Residential customers contribute right at 2/3 of the total. The wastewater system is the least seasonal of our systems. Another way to state that is that its performance is the most stable or most predictable. The wastewater system is projected to have about $41 million in revenue from billings to meet its expenses. The fiscal 20 data does reflect 6 months of actual revenue. And again, the green line is showing our base case forecast prior to making adjustments for COVID-19 impacts. Here are summary level long-term trends in the wastewater forecast. This table shows the 10-year average annual rate of change in number of customers, quantities billed, and revenue for the wastewater system. We're showing the last 10 years of history in the first 10 years of our forecast. Historical revenues include rate increases, while projected revenues do not. Last but not least, the electric system. For our 98,000 plus electric customers, these are the major groups that we develop, that we have specific and unique rate classifications. The bottom-up forecasting methodology I discussed earlier develops forecasts for each of these customer segments. Residential energy sales make up about 46% of total retail energy, while the 3 commercial classes combine for 53%, and outdoor lighting is just over 1%. The general service demand group, I sometimes refer to as our bread and butter customers, that comprises 63% of all non-residential sales. We also provide most of the power that the city of Alachua needs to run its electric utility through a wholesale arrangement. These are the major components of revenue from electric sales as we're forecasting them over the next 10 years. Unique to the electric system, non-residential revenues are greater than residential. The electric system is projected to have about $180 million in non-fuel revenues from sales available to meet its expenses. Again, the fiscal 20 data reflects 6 months of actual revenue. Fiscal 20 sales are a little low as a result of the mild winter that also impacted the gas system. And the green line represents our base case forecast prior to making the budget adjustments for COVID-19 impacts. These are summary level long-term trends in the electric forecast. Again, showing 10 years of history and 10 years of projections for number of customers, energy sales, and revenue. Again, this figure includes just any historical rate increases that occurred, while this one is based on current prices. Historically, we have implemented rate increases over time. This is just an informational slide. The historical revenue figures that you've seen throughout this presentation include all these pricing changes, and one last time for emphasis, all of the projected revenues that you're seeing tonight are based on current fiscal 20 pricing and do not include any rate increases. I'll talk a little bit now about how we adjusted our base case forecasts to reflect impacts from the COVID-19 pandemic. Number of customers and average use per customer were addressed for each month from April through December of this year. These alternate customer and usage statistics were allowed to flow back through the forecast to generate revenue projections that you've seen thus far today. Summary level non-fuel revenue losses for fiscal 20 and 21 are shown here. These are the reductions compared to our original base case forecast. That's what I mean by losses. On a percentage basis, we anticipate the energy systems suffering slightly larger losses than the water and wastewater systems. And over the next several slides, I'll walk through the process that was applied to make these adjustments in each system. If you will recall the bottom-up forecasting methodology, our two primary pieces are number of customers and usage per customer. So first, I made subjective assessments regarding number of customers by billing class for each month from April through December. The approach is optimistic in that it assumes life in Gainesville will resume normality during the fall semester. So if we do not have live classes and home football games this fall, these assumptions are likely to be overly optimistic. This is the electric system, multipliers for number of customers. There was assumed to be no impact to the number of residential customers, but general service non-demand and general service demand were projected to experience some degradation from our base case forecast. I assigned these multipliers to the base case projections for each month, which generated new customer counts for each month from April through December. A multiplier of 0.9 means that we expect to bill 10% fewer customers. Similarly, and next, I made assessments regarding usage per customer for each class. You can see that residential usage was projected to increase slightly as a function of the stay-home orders in April and May, while usage among our other groups was projected to decline slightly. So these new values for number of customers and usage per customer were run back through the revenue forecast template, which generated new customer and sales levels and our COVID-19 scenario of revenue projections that we're including in the budget. The same concept was applied to the other systems. Here you see the number of that the number of non-residential water customers was forecast to decline slightly compared to the base case. And here you see the assumptions we made regarding usage per customer for residential, non-residential, and the University of Florida. Similar to the electric system, usage per customer was forecast equal or higher in the residential sector, but lower in the other sectors. The pattern of water system adjustments was applied similarly to the wastewater system. This is residential and non-residential customers by month. These are my multipliers. And usage per customer was projected equal or higher in residential again, but lower, slightly lower in non-residential during these months. These are the multipliers that were applied to number of natural gas customers by billing group. The only impact to number of gas customers is in the commercial group. And these are the multipliers that were applied to usage per customer by billing group for the gas system. I assumed, again, there would be small short-term gains in residential and offsetting declines that lingered into the fall in the non-residential sector. You can kind of see the pattern in all of these, especially in the usage per customer. Some have likened it to the Nike swoosh. It kind of dips down the most in the summer and then tapers back up toward the base case as the fall goes along. So the overall assumption is that by the time we get to January, we're back on track. Again, optimistic, yes. So that's the conclusion of the COVID-19 forecast adjustments, which means it's also the conclusion of the revenue forecast presentation. I will be coming back later during the discussion of rates, but I will pause here.
All right. Thank you, Todd. And also thank you for your many years of service for this utility, our city utility. I always enjoy your thorough discussion of all the things that go into these planning exercises. So I certainly have appreciated that over the years I've gotten to know you. So thank you very much for that.
And thank you, Dr. Wheeler. It's been a pleasure to work with the UAB.
Yes. Okay, any questions for Todd?
Chair?
Yes, go ahead, Tim.
I was just wondering, what exactly is the point of not including any estimated rate increases in the 10-year projection? What's the benefit of modeling it that way?
Because it's the starting point for doing our budget work. So if we show a stream of revenue projections with no increases and then hold that up against expense projections, it allows us to run separate calculations as to what the needed revenue requirements might be.
Hey, Todd, if I could add here, I mean, I think that's a great question, because that's the one thing I get from Todd's presentation every year is when I look at each one of those systems, gas, water, wastewater, and electric, I see what the past 10 years has been. And like on gas, you see it's been 1.61%. Water, it's 3.44%. Wastewater is 3.07, and electric, it's 2.72. So give or take 2 to 3% is what the annual average increase is. But embedded in GRU's business model and its territory, we have somewhere in the order of 0.5% to 0.75% that we will recover through the assumed growth in the customer base and the declining usage. So it creates a natural gap moving forward in our business model of 2 to 3% that one could assume would come from increases in rates, reduction in expenses, or services. So it really does give you a footprint and a forecast moving forward as to where the hurdles GRU is seeing. You know, we're not in a territory or have a territory that it is expanding. It's in some ways declining, and it has its own distinct disadvantages to it. Am I overstating that, Todd, or is that?
No, I think you explained it very well. We have basically what my charts are showing here is the natural growth, the growth in revenue that would occur from increased sales. And the increased sales growth is largely due to increased number of customers. It's actually, you know, we expect slight declines in the usage for each customer, but the number of customers is growing faster than the usage per customer is declining. So we expect this 0.5 to 1% range of natural growth in revenue. And then anything that we need, be it even just inflation based, to operate our system would have to go on top of that with future rate changes.
But it does indicate some growth even without the rate increases. And I guess
yes, sir. We are expecting growth. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
All right. Fletcher, you have a question. Go ahead.
Yeah. Let's see if I'm unmuted here.
You're good.
Yeah, you mentioned you have 8 customers that are the bread and butter, the very large customers. Can you give us some examples of which ones those are? I mean, would it be a hospital or a mall, or what kind of customer are we talking about for that class?
Yes, sir. The largest customers in the natural gas system include the hospitals, Waste Management is fueling their trucks. They're one of our large volume customers. So there are about 8 of those. And there is a lot of overlap in the electric system with who those customers are.
Right.
So in the electric system, it's our wastewater plant, our water plant, North Florida Regional Medical Center, UF's Waldo Road East Campus, State of Florida's Department of Children and Family Services, also known as Takachali, the GRU South Energy Center, UF Health Shands Hospital, Cyvance, the VA Medical Center, and Santa Fe College. Those are our 10 electric large power customers. And if you mix in, some are not large volume gas customers, but include I like to make sure to mention the waste management customer for the natural gas system.
Okay, thanks.
Sure thing.
Okay. Without any further questions, I think we're on to the next presentation.
Actually, I had a question.
Go ahead. Is that Jason?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
Okay. So actually, this slide that we're looking at right now, I just was wondering if you could explain or re-explain why that big jump exists from 2020 to 2021 in electric and gas when it remains relatively flat beyond 2021?
Yes, sir, I believe I can. So that the 2020 figure includes 6 months of actual data, and we had a very mild winter. So in our energy systems, our sales were below the projected levels. So in any year beyond that, 21 on, we're assuming normal weather in our forecast work. So that's why you see that little stair step, and you kind of focus on the red bar, the 176 to 181, for example. That's a shortfall in electric sales related to a very mild winter.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and congratulations on your retirement.
I appreciate it.
Mr. Chair, it looks like we have another question from Member Jacobson.
Okay, all right, thanks. Go ahead, Member Jacobson.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wouldn't want to pass up on the opportunity to have one last shot at Todd, so I let go. But
Ed left the door wide open, didn't he?
He did. But seriously, Todd, I really do appreciate just the thoroughness, and the details that you provided all these years. So, good luck with your retirement. So my question though is about the assumption that we're going to have classes and football games and all of that in the fall. I mean, honestly, I think that's unrealistic. I can't imagine having football games. I think we're going to discover real quickly as students come in that it's just not going to work. What does that mean to the forecast and to these budgeting decisions if things really don't shift significantly from where they are now?
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm feeling that vibe. You kind of want to consider that this work was produced in April, and I was at the time honestly hoping that things were going to start to reopen in May. So I feel that sense of pessimism, and we're going to have to move forward with a budget for fiscal 21 and set rates with the knowledge that we have in hand at this time. And kind of just like what you see on the chart here, the fiscal 20 data falls short in the electric and gas system. That simply puts more pressure on our ability to meet expenses going forward. So if 21 comes in low or any other future year, it simply takes away from our ability to meet expenses, and of course that translates to more upward rate pressure.
And
so what happens?
But
I'm sorry, go ahead, Mark.
Mr. Chair, if I might, I mean, Todd's right on the beam, although I will tell you, I usually put my money on Todd when it comes to forecasts. So we don't, obviously, it's an impossible task that we laid out before him to determine, when the severity will ease off. But what I can tell you is, in the event that his forecasts are optimistic and we see a shortfall in revenue in 21. That's one of the reasons that we came to you and to the City Commission in April and bolstered our liquidity. If you recall, we added a $50 million taxable line of credit with Truist. If it comes to the point that we need to, hopefully it won't, and I'm not saying that I expect that it will, but if it comes to the point where we need to augment our liquidity because our revenues are down, that is available to us on a next day basis. It's a relatively mild expense at 2.6%, and it's something that we can actually spread that cost out a little bit over time. So while we hope that that things come out on the optimistic side, we also plan, and we tried to look ahead and determine that, make sure that our liquidity levels were where they needed to be. And I'll touch on those a little bit in the next part of the presentation, but we understand that we do have exposure that we normally might not have. That Todd, as phenomenal as he is in forecasting, like I said, has been set an impossible task. But in the event that it is optimistic, we're equipped to handle that at a relatively modest cost.
Yeah, I was disappointed that Todd didn't predict the pandemic last year. So, but you take what you can get. Thank you for that.
That's what happens when you get older, right, Todd?
Like I said, I'm an optimist. I wouldn't predict a pandemic, but we all know that the fall semester is the economic engine of the Gainesville regional economy, and I remain hopeful because a lot of folks will be hurt severely if they don't get to run their businesses in the fall the way they hoped.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes, go ahead, Member Wheeler.
So I'm going to follow up to Mark's comments just now about we have some flexibility due to the short-term, I won't call it borrowing, but the short-term liquidity that we have. And I don't know if you or Ed can answer this, but how far along, where will we be in the budget process when classes are supposed to begin in August and September? And if classes don't get held, is that going to be before or after we've already set rates, or how do we is there any way of anticipating the need to respond quickly if UF says no classes? Will the short-term liquidity handle that? Will that not affect the rates?
Yes, it will. The two ordinance readings are in September. So, unfortunately, the two events are the finalizing of the budget and the probably the decision as to whether they go live with classes will be pretty close together. But that short-term liquidity it has next day availability. We essentially send a form to the bank, and whatever level we believe we need will be available the next day. So yes, it gives us the ability to pivot in the event that we need to and go in a different direction.
The rates will be set at that point, and we're using the short-term liquidity to adjust, for at least for this fall.
If we have to.
Yeah. And before I turn my mic off, I would like to add that to the comments of the other board members, congratulations to Todd upon your retirement, and thanks so much for your service over the years.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Wheeler.
Yeah, I'm just still getting over the fact that he doesn't look old enough to retire, and I certainly do.
I started young.
Right. All right. Okay.
Yeah, you're ending young as well.
All right. Should we move on to the budget workshop?
Yes, we should. And Robin, I'll ask you to share your screen. I won't even try. And I want to make sure that everybody understands this is not a tech problem. This is, I'm sure, an operator problem. Our tech folks are the best. So, but I'm just going to have Robin share.
Which?
It's the budget workshop final presentation.
Okay, we're good. unmute me so I can hear. Oh, okay. That's Mark.
Okay, can you all see the screen with the budget workshop?
Not yet.
I think that's the problem.
All right, there it is.
Here we go. Okay, this is the second piece of the presentation. It contains the general manager's recommendation. And I will tell you right off the bat that all the quotes are courtesy of the general manager, not the budget and finance staff.
Way to distance yourself from that there, Mark.
Right off the bat, hey, I'm not messing around. Okay, Robin, if we can go to the next slide. And then the next one. I won't spend much time on this. This is the list of all the meetings that were repurposed, rescheduled, or canceled. And obviously we are at July 9th UAB meeting on the 13th. We will make this portion of the presentation as well as Todd's pieces to the City Commission. We have July 20th as a placeholder with the City Commission in the event that we need another meeting. And then, like I said, in response to Member Wheeler's questions, the 2 readings of the budget ordinances are scheduled to be held in September. Next slide, please. This is our budget mission. As with many things in life, it's a balancing act. We want to be able to provide safe, reliable, environmentally responsible service levels that are in concert with our quality of life desires, and at the same time, to the extent possible, keep those competitively priced. Next slide. Our goal is obviously it's a financial healthy utility to fulfill those fiduciary responsibilities that we discussed in the prior segment. Next slide, please. So this is a little bit of a refresher. We've touched on some of these things already. In the 2019 process, we talked at length with the utility and the UAB about declining cash levels, declining revenues. In January 2019, as part of that 2020 budget process, we showed projections over the next 6 years of shortfalls between $6 and $13 million. Our cash had fallen below the levels where we wanted it to be. And as a result, we talked with the board and with the City Commission about a plan to mitigate the shortfall, as if you'll recall, in the general manager's scorecard, which we're currently putting into play. Next slide. So what contributed to that shortfall? Obviously, there have been prior decisions that have contributed to those issues. In addition to changes in customer behavior and resource consumption related to the recession and general conservation efforts. And we talked about this a little bit a minute ago. We have here at GRU, we have very little organic growth in our revenues. We just discussed our revenues are relatively flat. When you combine that with high fixed costs and variable operating expenses that are increasing at rates that exceed the organic growth in sales, that's a difficult business model to sustain. And what it leaves you with, essentially, without some other type of alternatives that you might employ, it leaves you with adjusting price. Next slide. These are the pieces that we presented to the City Commission and to the board back in January 2019. We talked about a projected path of rate increases. The City Commission went down that road, if you'll recall. We put together an either-or, looked at a 6% rate hike or a reduction in GFT payments. The Commission chose the 6% rate hike, and that was implemented. We restructured debt in 2019 and generated some near-term debt service expense reductions, as well as in addition to what we did in 2020, and we've reduced expenses as well. Next slide. What we were hoping to avoid with these actions was a negative impact on our rate stabilization fund, further downgrades by our rating agencies. We've got the point on this slide that, and I think I made this point when we in our earlier portion of the presentation. We still have a risk of being further downgraded by the rating agencies. Fitch is very concerned about our leverage ratios, and as I said, S&P is keeping a close eye on what happens in the economy in the fall and with UF. We want to the extent possible, we want to avoid using a line of credit to pay our bills. That may be a reality for us given what happens with COVID. And we want to keep from having any more of the trust that we've built with the rating agencies and bondholders eroding. We want to look at, and we're in the process of looking at putting in a formulaic method to determine the GFT, one that meshes with our ability to pay. And we want to obviously at all costs, we want to avoid reduction of any essential services or any impact on safety and reliability. Next slide. This is the flip side, the benefits of following that plan. When we did the 2019 B and C Series B and C restructuring, our goal was to bolster our cash reserves, bring them up to acceptable levels, generate some potential rate mitigation through reducing debt service, making some dollars available for potential debt defeasance, but also building up our portions of our reserves so that we could increase the equity in some of our tech investments that we know are coming down the road. And that we feel by doing that we can do a better job of securing our financial foundation and putting a plan squarely in place by 2025. Next slide. And like we've talked about, working along with the board and the commission, we've completed the following. The City Commission approved a cash balance policy, which is assisting us in stabilizing our cash levels. 2019 restructuring generated a window of time where we could do some rate mitigation. And the 2020 restructuring will allow us, as we go through time, to take advantage of using those savings to do some debt defeasance, which will help us keep our leverage ratios down, as well as generating interest savings on our debt portfolio. Next slide. Obviously we have some challenges in addition to the fact that we've got very little organic sales growth that we are forecasting. We've got a bump up in our debt service payments in 2026. We have some series who will begin to pay principal on. That'll bump that up noticeably. Obviously, our operating costs will continue to grow naturally from 20 to 25. We think that the rate increases that we have in our modeling now will help us stabilize cash levels while those costs go up. And that 2019 restructuring will give us the ability, hopefully, to stabilize, while the 2020 restructuring will really kick in beginning in 2024. That's when the substantial dollars available for debt defeasance will become available to us. Next slide. During the 2021 budget process, we had a couple other issues come up. Obviously, COVID is the biggest one. We had slightly higher merit increases approved by the City Commission versus what were in our models last year for 2021. The total rewards impact we had baked in. We were aware of that, so that was not a particular very impactful issue. We did in 21 have a little bit higher O&M projections than we foresaw a year ago, and that's simply because we are allocating less labor to capital than we projected a year earlier, which means that essentially our capital expenses haven't risen to the levels that we expected. Obviously, our payroll is the same one way or the other, and if we're spending less effort on capital, then that a larger piece of that payroll is flowing through to O&M and impacting our rates. And like I say, you know, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but we've talked a number of times about the fact that we need to look at a modification to the GFT, and hopefully we will have something that comes to fruition out of bringing in this third-party consultant. Next slide. We've completed the following. We reduced service levels almost $2 million in 2020, part of that being the onboarding of NACE during that time period. In the 2021 budget, we've cut $3.4 million in O&M expenses, including freezing or eliminating 12 positions in 2021, 8 of which are either vacant managerial or professional slots. Next slide. We still got some things that we've got to deal with. Like we said, our debt service payments are still significant. They'll be moving up in 2025, and they will more than likely be, we will obviously continue to have to borrow money. We are a capital intensive industry. We need to be able to access the capital markets to provide funds and resources for the construction, maintenance, and acquisition of our capital needs. And we are still facing the factors that we've talked about all along. Our average consumption is going down, as Todd pointed out. We have very little organic growth in customers, and so, you know, like I mentioned before, flat revenues, high fixed cost, increased operating expenses is a tough business model to sustain. Next slide. So what's the landscape going forward? Obviously, we've got to focus on renewable energy sources. Our solar PPA is in progress. The DH2 gasification project as a bridge will allow us to do some reducing fossil fuel consumption in real time. We have several significant technology updates. Like I said, hopefully we will be generating some incremental reserves that we can use to provide a little more equity to that funding and have to borrow a little bit less, but we're working on our a new customer service and customer information service platform right now, as well as entertaining proposals for automated meter infrastructure. Next slide. So we working with the commission and the board. We're looking at implementing or potentially implementing either a revenue requirement in 21 or no revenue requirement increase in 21 with larger bumps in 22 and 23 while dealing with the issues that we've already spoken to. Next slide. Hopefully this pathway will provide us the ability to continue to stabilize our cash levels, and particularly in the electric system, while our overall reserves through this planning period, we project will meet or exceed the target levels. Right now, the electric system, if you look at it separately, is under target. We hope by 23 and 24 to bring that up to the level where to our policy levels. We are keeping the current GFT level in 2021 at 38.3 million. And right now in our modeling through our forecast period of 2027, we have continued to hold that GFT at 38.3 million until we see the results of the third-party review of the formula. Next slide. So we had the initial plan in 2019 was to utilize the $65 million in near-term debt service expense reduction from the 2019 B&C restructuring. Like I said, to add to reserve, to mitigate rates, to invest in infrastructure, and potentially to defease debt. We are now planning to use the bulk of that on two pieces of that puzzle. Number one, to mitigate rate pressure through the forecast period, and to provide equity investment in infrastructure. The 2020 savings that we pointed out earlier will be used solely for debt defeasance, but we are planning now to use only a small portion of the $65 million from 2019 B and C to defease debt. Next slide. This is the rate matrix, and Ed, I don't know if you wanted to speak to this or if you wanted me to cover it, but just let me know.
Yeah, I certainly don't mind jumping in here. It's it comes with my recommendation, I guess. But, well, I don't guess, I know. But yeah, let me talk to it a little bit, and if I slip up there, Mark, I'm sure you'll keep me straight. I think it's appropriate that it is a rate matrix, and I think it's a little bit of the red pill. If people remember the movie, we're not looking at the blue pill here. We're going into this with acceptance of the unpleasant realities. So the first column there is measured against four things. Last year we were when we got the 6% increase on the electric side, we were indicating that we were foreseeing a 4.42% increase in fiscal year 2021. Of course, that came with no indication of any COVID impact. We were looking to basically reserve about $23 million in debt defeasance monies resulting from fiscal year 19 and fiscal year 20 of these restructurings. We're also adding about $11 million to reserves, and we didn't foresee any O&M reductions. That's kind of the baseline for what we were looking at going into 2021. Well, then the second column shows that COVID hit. And so we're projecting in this scenario 7.7 million in revenue loss, which is a little higher than what Todd actually, I think, put together for his projections. We were being a little less optimistic than Todd. And we still were looking to pay down $23 million and or at least have that money available for debt defeasance along with the same reserves and no O&M reduction. And with that came a 6% increase in the base electric rates. We looked at what would we do to lower that rate, given the fact that there's many people in our community suffering from the impacts of the COVID pandemic on loss of jobs, loss of income, a loss of the ability to have childcare for their family. So in the 2% number, we absorbed that loss of $7.7 million in revenue by ostensibly paying down those rates with that $23 million of monies that would eventually go to debt defeasance. And we forego adding any money to our reserves and not having O&M reductions. So we can move from 6% to 2% with those types of levers, if you will. To get to 0%, which is what, quite frankly, I'm surprised that I'm actually recommending this, but I'm recommending going to 0% because we can absorb $3.5 million in O&M reductions, as Mark was talking about. We will be freezing 13 positions, most of those management that are in the budget. We won't rehire for those positions. We're taking a bunch of expenses that include travel and training, and we're going down the bare bones minimum on that. We're cutting almost to the bone any take-home vehicles that are there for issues of reliability, really improved service levels, but it's not something that we can afford. to do at this point in time. So with those types of elements, I'm recommending across the board, zero increase in the electric, water, wastewater, and gas systems. And with that, I think that's the red pill.
And that is the last slide in this section. It was our assumption that at this point the board would want to have some discussion about the general manager's recommendation before we move to the final piece of the budget presentation, which is Todd's rate work.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
I have a lot of questions, but Mr. Wheeler.
Yeah, go ahead, Member Wheeler.
I have two quick questions in regards to one of the slides that Mark had just put up. You mentioned both the solar PPA and the AMI initiative. The question I have for the PPA is, what is our status? Where do we stand with that project at this moment? And the question about AMI is, how is this all going to play out in bringing AMI into the utility? That's a big ticket item that we've been talking about for a while. Love to see it happen. And I understand that we may have to defer, but do you have any idea how this is going to affect those two projects?
Yeah, that's a great question, Chair, Member Wheeler. The solar PPA, I think we're bringing back within the next week or so to the commission. We were waiting under the advice of city attorney's office to have a what do you call it, the in-person commission meeting for that. But given the continued inability to get together in large groups, we would be, we'll go back to that teeter-totter that Mark showed. We'd be weighing the possibility that we'd actually lose all the work that went into that contract because it would expire, versus having this public meeting. And I think that we're getting pretty adept at these Zooms, and I think that we'll still get the type of community input, and we'll still get the questions that we can answer. So we're moving ahead with that, Member Wheeler, with the solar PPA. Now, in regard to the AMI, we are really to the point with that and the customer information system upgrade, or information technology upgrade, where they're coming together kind of contemporaneously to the same end. And I think we have an opportunity here to do an upgrade to our customer system that will facilitate the AMI implementation as well. And within our organization, we've talked about the strategic rollout of that AMI that will literally have the ability to pay for itself as we go along. And that's what we're developing, and hoping that we can bring that back to both the UAB and the City Commission in the fall. And they will stand on their own. And we believe that there's a return on investment that will support both of those items. Is that helpful?
It is. I really do hope that the solar PPA is not put off too much longer. I'd hate to see, as you said, all that work we put into it. And I know that the budget's tight, but I really want to keep bringing up AMI because it's the future for the utility, and it's somehow we got to get there. Thank you.
I concur.
All right, and then there was another question out there.
Yes, Mr. Chair, Member Rockwell. I've got several questions, and then just some statements and ideas. First, I want to say that I really appreciate Mr. Bilarski's and the GRU's team's willingness to tighten the belt and try to solve the problem and keep rates down. But there's just a lot going through my head right now. My first question is kind of a doozy. What exactly is GRU's debt to equity ratio? Is that a number you have handy or willing to divulge?
Oh yeah,
Well,
Mark, Mark can repeat that in his sleep.
I can tell you our debt to capital asset ratio, which is really the more important one that the rating agencies look at. It is just over 80%, and that is significantly higher than they like to see. It's not one that they put a lot of particular emphasis on, but it does show that we are highly leveraged.
And when it comes to GRU's assets, you're primarily talking about your generating facilities and your infrastructure would be the main source of assets?
For the most part, yes.
And so, but because you had to borrow money to create those assets and maintain them, then that's what's throwing the ratio off so much. Because I'm not a financial wizard, so I'm just trying to make sure I'm wrapping my head around this correctly.
Our debt, if I might, I'll give you just a slight discourse on it. The utilities debt between 1989 and 2005, its outstanding principal actually remained fairly stable. Beginning in 2005, we had a number of large projects, along with some regulatory issues that doubled our debt between 2005 and 2012. And then the biomass plant doubled it again with the cost of the imputed cost of the PPA. We reduced it somewhat, as I showed you on that graph, from the 1.9 billion to 1.7 billion when we bought out the PPA. But yes, those are the issues that have driven our debt levels up significantly to the point where some of the rating agencies are concerned about our leverage. And leverage is simply the amount of free cash flow available to service that debt piece. And so that's the number that Fitch really focuses on.
Right.
It's the funds available to pay that debt service.
It becomes a concern of your ability to pay back the debt. So am I right in understanding that you're not really going to, GRU can't create new assets without taking on more debt. So the only way really to get that ratio lower is to pay down debt.
There's several ways to hold that ratio down. One is by increasing the amount of equity that we put into building that infrastructure, our utility plant improvement fund, and that's one of the tasks that I was referring to from we got from the restructuring. We're building our reserve levels up. We're building up our utility plant improvement fund so that we can utilize a larger percentage of cash to do some of these tech investments such as AMI and DH2 piece going forward. You're right. We are always going to be in the market. I don't want to mislead anybody. The utility is always, every 2 to 3 years, is going to have to go into the market to borrow money to fund a portion of those assets, whether it's acquiring assets, constructing them, or maintaining them. So it is going to be a challenge to reduce that leverage piece. And we're looking at it by building up our cash reserves and increasing the amount of equity that we apply to those assets, as well as defeasing some debt going forward with those restructuring savings. Defeasing the debt the impact of that is somewhat spread out over time, but yes, those are the tools that we hope to be able to use, not necessarily to lower leverage, because I don't know how quickly or how effectively we can actually lower it, but we do hope to steady that number and maintain it and then start to bring it down slowly.
Could I say something, Tim? One of the ways, you kind of look at this against your personal finances, and I know Mark hates it when you compare some of what we do against personal finances, but one of the things that we do is we have a lot of reserves because it mitigates the fact that we have a lot of debt, and it makes the rating agencies comfortable that in emergencies and situations we can draw upon those reserves rather than incur additional debt. So there's that balance on the reserve side of the equation. On the debt side, we we are spending somewhere in the order of $100 million a year out of a $400 million revenue budget, or expense budget as well, since it's balanced budget, to pay down debt, to pay our debt, and actually not paying down debt, but it's funding the debt service. So a full 25% of what we're getting pays down the debt. Well, and wait a second, that's not exactly correct, because you had the presentation about the fuel, which is a pass-through. Can't do anything with that. So out of the 400 million, you take the 90 million out. We're using about $100 million to pay out of a $300 million revenue item. We're taking a third, one out of every $3 of what we receive to make our debt service payment. That's the red pill. Is that overstating it, Mark?
No, that's not overstating it, and you're right that that's part of the reason why we strive, or we endeavor to keep our liquidity levels high, because you're right, that's the mitigating factor for the rating agencies. We have heavy levels of debt, but at the same time we have $150 million in authorized but unissued commercial paper available to us. We have another $75 million in combined lines of credit, and that's what gives the rating agencies some comfort that we that we have that, if you want to look at it that way, that offsetting liquidity to address some of those issues.
Okay, thank you. And then I just want to make sure that I understand that the 65 million from the debt restructuring, that's a savings. That's not more borrowing. So that's not, I mean, not free money, but it's money that's available. And so now you're talking about, instead of investing, instead of using it to pay down debt and add to reserves, you're talking about using it to invest in infrastructure and other projects that would increase equity.
We are using that $65 million is near-term debt service reductions resulting from the 2019 B and C restructurings. We're using a portion of that $65 million to mitigate rate pressure. We're using another piece of it to build up our reserves so that we will have more equity in those investments that you just mentioned. That's correct. We are using very little of it, less than $1 million of it, to defease debt. We will use the $134 million from the 2020 restructurings to defease debt into the future.
Okay. And then just one last thing, if you bear with me, I want to throw out there as more of a hypothetical, because I do have issues with the GFT and the city's unwillingness to cooperate, or even play ball. Is there any? I mean, certainly it seems like it would be in the city's best interest to lower that debt to equity ratio, and it seems like the quickest way to do that is to pay down debt. Is there any scenario or possibility of so they don't want to reduce the GFT, but they offer incentives to GRU that, say if you meet this goal or you do thus and so, that then they give some of the GFT back in some form, or I mean, is it just all accounted for and gone before they even get it? I mean, would that be maybe more palatable to them than reducing what they get out of the deal?
The general manager may have a different viewpoint on this than I do, and if he does, I'm sure he's going to voice it right after I finish talking. But right now, yeah, that money's spoken for on the general government side. They're using that general fund transfer to deliver services to citizens. What we are hoping to do is to strike a balance. Number one, we want a formula, because rating agencies don't like the fact that it's simply a dollar amount. They want something that's empirical, that they can point to, and that we can say this is what the number is going to be. based on these financial metrics. So that's the first piece. We want a formula to drive that. And that's the way it was up through 2015. It was formula based. But what we're trying to do is come up with a formula that walks that balance. It gives them enough to deliver the services at the levels that they believe are appropriate, and at the same time, it doesn't exceed our ability to pay. In other words, in many recent years, we have transferred more in the GFT than we have generated in profit. That's not something that you can really, obviously sustain. So somewhere in between, Member Rockwell, there is a number that we believe makes sense for both sides.
Yeah, and I'll jump in because I'm not disagreeing with Mark, but I tend to look at it through a different prism. I do look at GRU as a business, and that business is to provide as healthy a bottom line to the city of Gainesville as we can, while being, competitively priced, maintaining environmental stewardship, being safe and reliable, and adhering to community values. So we are looking at somewhere on the order of $25 to $28 million in a bottom line. After we have revenue of $400 million, we come down to a bottom line. In a normal business, whether you're a limited partnership or you're, a C corporation, whatever you might be, a partnership, they're the monies to which you would distribute to your shareholders, your partners, in the form of dividends, profits, a host of things. Well, we're distributing $38.3 million on profits of $25 to $28 million. And we will be doing that for the foreseeable future. That's not a sustainable business model. And what will be the impetus to change that? I've met with the city manager, and we've agreed to bring in a consultant to talk about what might be the resolution in setting up a formula that will drive that. I will tell you, quite frankly, that my formula is revenues minus expenses equal profit. That's what you get. You don't typically need a consultant to do that. I could do that, maybe make some money in that. We'll see what the consultant does, but that's the ability that we have to pay. I think it would be strange for a consultant to come in and say, no. You need to pay more than what you're making. If he can do that in all good conscience, God bless him. But at the heart of what we're looking at right now, and look, I started this back in 2019, where I started talking about the fact, hey folks, we're making distributions in front of a general, in lieu of a general fund transfer. It's more than what we're making. And we're in a situation where we can only raise rates so high, and we can only reduce expenses so much before we start being unreliable, not providing the services. So it drops out the bottom. So Tim, you're exactly right. I think it's an issue that, heretofore has not been very well explored. It's a tough issue because it requires a very tough and sharp, analysis of both the utility and general government and where that meets. So I'm a little harsher on the subject than Mr. Benson here, but that, I always give you my 2 cents.
Thank you. I appreciate you guys' response. And I agree. To me, I mean, maybe it's bigger than that, but to me, it's dollars in, dollars out. And if GRU has to freeze pay raises and freeze hiring and potentially even lay people off so that the city doesn't have to raise taxes, that doesn't seem fair to me. And I'll support anything that attempts to address that disparity. So, thanks for bearing with me, and thanks for answering my question.
Good questions.
Thanks, Tim. And Fletcher, member Crow has a question.
Yeah, I actually had two questions. Um, we heard that the recommended approach is the 0% option. My question is, what would the rating agency say about that option compared with, say, the 2% option or such, 6%? Is there any downside to the 0% option that was recommended in light of possible response by rating agencies? That's the first question. The second question is the duration. We said that we've seen some fairly optimistic forecasts, and then this particular one at the 0% is relatively pessimistic. But what happens if things get really, really worse? I mean, much worse than the pessimistic forecast has. How long is the duration for this option in place, and what happens as a plan B to rectify something if really things go to hell in a handbasket? Those are my two questions.
You want to take the rating agency one, Mark, since you're so attuned to that?
Yeah, I'll take the rating agency. I want to make a couple points. Number one, the rating agencies, if left, all other things held constant, would prefer to see the 2%. They want to know that the commission, the city commission and UAB has the will to institute rate increases that are necessary to generate revenues to run the utility. So all other things equal, they would probably look at the 2% option as preferable. But I want to make this point, and I think I probably failed to articulate this as we've gone through it. But when we put our financial modeling together, we look at a forecast period, and it's generally 6 years. And so we're looking from 21 through 27. The 2% option in 21 entails behind it 2% increase in 22, 2% increase in 23, a 1.5% in 24, and then 1% increases from 25 to 27. We are not necessarily recommending that we throw out a 0% rate hike in 21 and then do nothing to ameliorate that impact. What the 0% rate proposal in 21 has along with it, instead of a 2% hike in 22, it has a 3%. Instead of a 2% hike in 23, it has a 3%, and then it's a 0.5% above the 2% level going forward. So by the time we reach the end of that forecast period, our total reserves will be approximately equal to what they would have been with the 2% hike in 21. So we're not looking at just that one slice. And to your second question about going to hell in a handbasket, I think the general manager will say we always have the ability to go back to the commission during the year, with new financial metrics and looking at different rates. But I'll let the manager handle that one.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. I appreciate you letting me have the hell in a handbasket question. If you remember, actually, there's a precedent for doing that when we bought out the power purchase agreement with BREC, and we put a budget together in that September timeframe for the new year that we didn't know whether that would occur or not. So we put together a budget that didn't reflect that. And then when we purchased the power purchase agreement, started operating the plant, we came back to the commission with actually at that point, a reduction in the overall, bill for the customers. So there is a precedent to come back. What gives me a lot of comfort is the financial package that BFA, Budget Finance and Accounting, which Mark is part of there, has put together. He's basically got a plan B and a C. With the short-term, working capital line, as well as, that's supplemented with some of our commercial paper. So he's reduced think of it this way, he's reduced the potential longer-term loss of revenue into a liquidity issue that can be filled virtually overnight, supplemented on a longer-term basis, and then fulfilled with a plan D, which would be going back to the commission and increasing rates to cover any of the future impacts. So I'm really pleased with how the group has operated to present us with something like that. And by the way, Mark took the blame for not talking about the 2% going to 3% in 2022 and 2023. That was my fault. When he turned it over to me, I was supposed to mention that. I forgot to do that. So again, sorry I failed you, Mark.
All right. Well, thank you all for those comments. I think we have a recommendation we're supposed to vote on.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes, Mr. Wheeler, Member Wheeler.
Just one more follow-up. I understand about running a business and all that, but we are a municipal utility. We serve the people who own the utility. Those are the citizens of the city of Gainesville. They set the priorities. They elect commissioners. Those are people who are politically elected to represent the city in making its priorities. And if the commission elects to set rates or to set a GFT, that is a political decision and reflects the priorities of the community. We can't take this utility and just look at it in a vacuum. I agree, we need to take all best practices to run it as efficiently, as effectively as possible, and I appreciate all that Ed and his people do. But in the grand scheme of things, we serve the people of Gainesville, and it is the commissioners who make those decisions. I don't think we have much choice tonight other than going with the 0%, given the way things have been laid out for us. But we are going to be back in the same boat we were wringing our hands about a year or so ago when we said we don't want rates going up and down, up and down. As Mark and Ed just spoke about, we're going to go with 0%. I think we have to do that. But then there are going to be future rate hikes and people are going to be saying, where the hell did this come from? Why are you jumping up so much? And that's unfortunate, but I've said my piece. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Wheeler.
Mr. Chair, there are a couple of other hands there.
Oh, okay. Who's next?
We got Member Jacobson and Member Fultz.
Okay, let's take Member Jacobson first.
This will be fairly quick. I just want to verify. So that the assumptions in the proposal are that's assuming the GFT remains constant for last year. So it's kind of before this new analysis is happening.
That's correct.
Okay, that's what I thought. I just wanted to verify that, and I do agree with Member Wheeler. And I've always said during my time here that really the GFT is where we recommend, and the city commission comes in to say and I fully recognize GRU's needs and desires. They have to balance the budget at some point. It's not magic money, but that's where that final decision making I think really does fall on the city commission. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to clarify. So this additional modeling could throw everything into a little bit of chaos, is what I'm hearing.
Thank you, Member Jacobson. Member Fultz.
Sure. So, and y'all will have to pardon me. I mean, I still haven't even gotten my full orientation, so I'm sure my questions are ill-informed. But one of them, I was wondering at the comparison charts that were in some of the backup materials showing our rates for gas and water and electric compared to all these other communities. And it was striking to me how our electric rates were on the high end, the really high end, and our gas rates were on the really low end. And I just was wondering why we wouldn't want to be more toward the middle of the pack with the natural gas rates if it would help us in these other areas, or are our natural gas sales small enough that it wouldn't actually make that big of a difference to the overall big picture?
Well, do you want to discuss, Mark, the sustainability of each one of these systems as a standalone entity?
Yeah, that's what I was going to mention. Our bond resolution, it lays out the fact that the 5 separate utilities are just that. They stand alone. It's not appropriate, not allowed for us to subsidize one system through the other. That would cause us issues with our bondholders, and it would certainly cause us issues with our own on the legal side with our resolution.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right. Well, I think that maybe brings us to the point where we can, anybody want to make a motion for that resolution for this item? Recommendation instead of resolution. Wow.
Mr. Chair, I move that we recommend approval or advise the City Commission to approve the General Manager's recommendation, no base rate increase for electric, water, wastewater, or gas, and a 1.84% inflationary increase in water, wastewater connection charges.
All right. Thank you. We have a motion there. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
All right. Member Jakes seconds that. Okay. That leads us to the point where making a recommendation. We need to see what citizens' comment is on this.
Yes, sir. We have a citizen standing by to speak. Nathan Scott. Mr. Scott, please go ahead.
Yes. Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Nathan Scott. At the end of the last meeting, I asked a series of questions. You opted, in lieu of getting answers to those questions, to proceed right to a vote. I thought that was blatantly disrespectful, particularly to a former state utility regulator that asked questions that the UAB didn't even contemplate asking. So I think that it demonstrates the willful ignorance of the UAB as a whole, as further evidenced by this meeting that failed to discuss the GFT. You guys are spineless in terms of challenging the city where the GFT has been the underlying problem. Mr. Pilarski said that he's been questioning the GFT for a number of years. I've been questioning the GFT since 2013, as documented in the Gainesville Sun op-ed. So the questions I have are directed to Mr. Benton through the chair, and Mr. Benton seems to be a man of his word. So I'm struggling to understand, and hopefully Mr. Benton can answer these questions, all of which I think the answer would be yes. That last year, GRU recommended a cash reserve policy, was adopted by the commission. That policy required multi-year rate increases. GRU also represented to the credit rating agencies that multi-year increase, along with the fact that any savings resulting from reduced near-term debt service obligations would be used to pay off debt. Questions were asked regarding that by the public as to whether that would be the case, that those funds would be strictly allocated for that. We were told yes. And in fact, now that's not the case because the money is being diverted, as referenced in Mr. Pilarski's email to the City Commission, to fund the GFT. So therein lies the problem. And as Mr. Benton mentioned, GRU is at risk of a further debt downgrade. You have an 80% debt to equity ratio, which is astronomical. But there's no attention given to the GFT. It's the elephant in the room. You guys don't want to do it because you say it's a political issue, and community values has nothing to do with community values. City Commission keeps spending money and drawing money from GRU that GRU can't afford to pay, and the UAB sits there and does nothing. So I'm deeply concerned about, again, the lack of discussion on the GFT, the fact that the cash reserve that required the multi-year rate increases, that went out the window. I understand there's COVID, but there's a lot of things that Mr. Benton said that this UAB should pay attention to rather than all this superficial discussion, because those are the important issues. And Mr. Pilarski covered himself and stated that if you go with a 0% increase this year, there are consequences in future years. And that's probably buried in the slide that I can't see because this meeting is not being streamed on Facebook, and it's not visible in Granius. So that's another issue regarding this meeting and the need for the UAB to uphold its fiduciary responsibility to the citizens of Gainesville instead of punting. So again, Mr. Chairman, you need to show some leadership. There are some financially astute people on that UAB, but if you guys are going to be spineless, then there's no basis for having a UAB to begin with. Just let the city commission do what they've always do and watch us get another debt downgrade. But some of the questions that were asked tonight touch upon some of these issues, but with white gloves. And again, Mr. Bolarski's telling you there's a problem, and the UAB isn't supporting the utility and acknowledging there's a problem and communicating that to the city commission. You guys are just taking the path of least resistance. So again, if I'm aggravated, it's because it's painful as a former state utility regulator to watch this utility be run in the ground, particularly by a UAB that won't do its job. So again, I would ask Mr. Benton, Mr. Chairman, to allude and answer some of these questions, because again, what I see here is we and the credit rating agencies were told that the reduction in near-term debt service obligations was going to be used to retire principal sooner rather than later to help reduce the leverage situation. That's not happening now, at least in the near term. And then, you know, the cash balances, the money's being diverted. All this money
thank
is
you,
being
Mr.
diverted to
Scott.
fund the city. That's
Thank you,
fundamentally
Mr.
wrong.
Scott, for your time. All right. Do we have
Mr.
any
Chairman,
other
that's the only-
citizen? Okay.
That's the only speaker at this time, sir.
All right. Thank you. All right. We've had our own discussion, member comment. Any further discussion by members of the board?
Mr. Chair, I would just like to mention that I just got finished bringing up some of these very subjects, and with the genuine and sincere hope that there will be further discussion and conversation in the future. I don't know that we can accomplish anything tonight, but clearly I have some of the same concerns, and I'm pretty sure other members of the board do as well. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Member Rockwell. Okay, all of that discussion and everything else, I think it's time for the staff to call a meeting vote or recommendation vote.
Member Wheeler,
Aye.
Member Jacobson,
Aye.
Member Rockwell,
Aye.
Member Crow,
Aye.
Member Fultz,
Yes.
and Chair Porter.
Aye.
That motion passes unanimously.
All right. Thank you. Now, we had two other presentations there, but we kind of did cover those, or were you going to go over there, Mr. Kamhout?
I am available and prepared to walk through. I would just open one of them.
Well, we kind of went through that. I kind of thinking that was backup detail, and we do have one other item, and the meeting is going kind of long. So if it's all right with everybody else, maybe we should move on to the mandatory tender discussion item.
It's up to you, Chair.
Fine by me.
All right, let's go on to that one.
Okay, Mr. Chair, as part of the financing to acquire the DHR facility in 2017, GRU issued $265 million in variable rate debt in the form of 2 direct purchase agreements. These were 3-year agreements with mandatory tender dates of November 7th, 2020. So it's time for us to prepare to evaluate options for renewing this debt. And there are 2 primary alternatives. One is to issue fixed rate debt to take out this variable rate debt. However, this debt is already synthetically fixed with swaps, so that's not really a viable option. So on the variable rate side, there are 3 alternatives. Number one, we could renew the existing direct purchase agreements, but with the market conditions created by the pandemic, there's a supply and demand imbalance. Businesses either need credit, they need to increase their credit, or they're drawing on their existing liquidity lines. And this has put pressure on banks balance sheets, and so the cost of the direct purchase agreements has increased, and it's um, probably not the most cost-effective method for us to utilize. So that narrows it down to two alternatives: the issuance of floating rate notes or variable rate demand bonds as being the most efficient for renewing this debt. Which methods of these will be preferable is going to be driven by investor preference. And so we need to do some price discovery. We plan to that end to post on EMA, which is the Electronic Municipal Market Access website that's designated by the Security and Exchange Commission as the official source of municipal market data and disclosure documents. We're going to post on that EMA website our intent to explore the alternatives for redeeming this debt. This will allow the banks that are supporting our efforts, which are Wells Fargo and Bank of America, to have some serious discussion with potential investors so that we can firm up the pricing around those two alternatives and make a determination as to which one's in our best interest. Now, this is an informational item, doesn't require any action tonight, but we wanted to let you know that in August or September, we'll be coming back with sets of supporting authorizing documents that support both of those methods, because what we will ask for the authorization at that point is to execute whichever alternative is cost beneficial to us at that point. So we wanted to be transparent. We didn't want to come back with a surprise all-in-one meeting and say, here are the documents and here's what we'd like to do. We wanted to let you know that we're starting this process, and we'll be coming back to you and the City Commission, like I said, in August or September, with a request to give us authorization to go down one of those paths. I also want to make clear that this is not additional debt. This is existing variable rate debt, 2017 Bs and Cs. This is simply the process of rolling it forward from the initial 3-year agreement. And even though there's no action required, I'm more than happy to answer questions.
Okay, do we have any questions on that? Again, that was just informational. You're going to present that to the City Commission?
Yes, sir. That'll be presented to the City Commission at their meeting Thursday.
Right.
They'll get the same presentation you just got.
Okay. And then we do have another one that we do have to make a recommendation on, the next item, the resolution.
That's correct. If you're ready for me to go on, I'll move on to that one.
Barring any questions, I recommend we move on.
Okay. As we've talked about before tonight, one of our sources of liquidity, we maintain a $25 million taxable commercial paper program. It's our commercial paper notes Series D. We're required by our bond resolution, investors and rating agencies, to maintain liquidity facilities to secure this program. They step in and provide funds to make payments on maturing commercial paper on each roll date in the event there's a market disruption and the utility can't remarket their commercial paper. This facility expires on August 28th, 2020. And once again, due to the market conditions caused by the pandemic, liquidity facility fees are relatively high right now. So our financial advisor is recommending that we renew the existing facility on a short-term basis for 1 year. This will give us the opportunity hopefully for market conditions to potentially moderate, but it will also coincide with the expiration of the liquidity facility on our tax-exempt commercial paper program, and give us the ability, if it's either necessary or beneficial, to roll those two together. So what we're asking the UAB tonight is to recommend to the City Commission that they authorize the 1-year extension of the existing liquidity facility on the taxable commercial paper program with State Street, and also authorize the other supporting documents for that program.
All right. Any questions on this item?
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yeah, Member Wheeler, go ahead.
So we're just extending the existing loan credit, however you want to state it. There'll be a cost of 167,500, but no matter what, we would have that cost, even if we went out for new or did something else. So we're keeping it as is. We're not adding any additional cost. We're not taking any cost away. We're just extending what we have for another year. Is that correct?
We're extending what we have for another year. The price is different. The existing price is 47 basis points. The new price for the 1-year extension is 67 basis points. That's the best we can get in the market right now. As I said, the costs are relatively high currently. That's why we're only extending this for 1 year. We hope that over this next year, those prices, the market will moderate a little bit. It'll come back down. So it's an extra 20 basis points on that piece, which is about an extra $50,000 over what we're paying right now.
But if we went out on the market, we'd have to pay that anyway.
Yes, we would, and that's why we don't want to enter into a longer term agreement, because we don't want to lock into a price that we hope will come back down over the next year.
Exactly. That's what thank you.
All right. Any other questions? And thank you for that explanation, Mark. That was on top of Wes's question. I think that covered all of my questions too. Okay, we need to make a recommendation on this one. So does anybody have a motion on this one?
So move staff's recommendation.
We have a motion on that. Do we have a second?
Second.
I'll second that.
All right, we have first second came in from Member Rockwell. Thank you. All right, so we have a motion and a second. We've had our discussion. Is there citizen comment on this?
Yes, sir. Mr. Scott wanted to speak to this item as well. Mr. Scott.
All right, thank you.
Yes, good evening, Nathan Scott. I hope that the UAB will indulge a citizen who's a former state utility regulator and get some questions answered, because everything I say is met with silence. So that's indicative of the conduct of this board, which is very disturbing. So with respect to the price discovery, I support that. Again, had we locked in with a fixed rate, we wouldn't be subject to these constant renewals. I understand, and perhaps Mr. Benton can correct me if I'm wrong, but this is going to cost us $167,000 to renew for 1 year in the near term, because rates are high, or at least the credit facility rates are high. I spoke to the basis points, so that's one question. Second question, would that cost exist if this were fixed rate debt? I think the answer to that would be no. And then finally, a question that I'd like to get answered. You mentioned the credit facility that GRU has available to draw upon, which is actually one of the positive things I can say lately that GRU did, because it provides liquidity. But what might happen, and what is the likelihood of a downgrade if GRU taps that credit facility? If Mr. Benton can elaborate on those three questions, I greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, that's the only call at this time.
All right, thank you very much. Any further comments? All right, hearing none, can we have staff take a member roll call on that vote?
Member Wheeler,
He's got his mute on.
I'm sorry, I didn't hit my mute button. Thank you.
so Member Wheeler, what was your vote?
Aye.
Thank you. Member Jacobson.
Aye.
Member Miles is absent. Member Rockwell.
Aye.
Member Crow.
Aye.
And Member Fultz.
Yes.
And Chair Wheeler, or I'm sorry, Chair Porter.
Aye. Aye, thank you.
Yes, that motion passes unanimously.
I've been promoted twice this meeting.
Yeah, right. That's okay. Well, you'll be promoted again another few months, but anyway, we'll go from there. All right, again, operating under the meeting operational planning we have here with emergency orders, I think, then the only thing we do at the end of the meeting is discuss the next meeting date.
Mr. Chair, there's not an opportunity to ask a question.
Well, go ahead, Jason.
I only ask this because it's time sensitive. I wanted to just verify that the utility intends to resume with cutoffs as of July 17th. Is that correct?
Yeah, Ed's coming back on.
I'm getting back on here. Yes, we will end the moratorium on shutoffs. What we will be doing and have been doing is extending automatic 6 months extension for people that are late in paying their bill. And we'll, I think I just heard from my my customer service fellow that we extended something like 4,900 in the last billing period for somewhere upwards of a couple $1 million, and we'll continue to do that so that we can spread that balance over that 6 month period. Now, if that customer is unable to maintain the payment schedule that we've set forward, we will have to take action and move towards shutoffs. But we're probably, I don't know of a utility in the state right now that is, taking those past due balances and put them on a 6 month or longer payment schedule so that we mitigate the possibility of shutoffs during this period of time. So that's the position that we're taking in the protocol we've established.
I just wanted to note that, I mean, folks probably saw that the county commission is going to be distributing this CARES funding, and over 21 million of that is designated to go towards individual assistant grants, including utility assistance. So that application process hasn't rolled out yet, but it will be soon, hopefully. And it just would be a shame to see anyone in this community have their utility service disconnected in the midst of a state emergency when this funding is on the way.
Member Foltz, I agree with you 100%, which is why we were actually putting this forth several months ago, knowing that hard stops to moratoriums are very detrimental to folks that have built up probably a little higher balance than they maybe even anticipated. It will also allow us to kind of go through the devil in the details part of that CARE Act. I think it's called the CARE Act. And it's going to be distributed, from what I understand, to the county. And then it will kind of maneuver its way through the various agencies and such. So even though the number sounds large, I think those numbers also are allocated to rent and a whole host of things. We'll see how much GRU gets or the customers get to pay off their actual utilities. I hope it's large. I mean, I hope it's beneficial to our customers. So that's why the 6 months is there. Now, there may be some people that will not even be receptive to a payment schedule, and they may be unable to make that payment. We're going to try to work with them as hard as we can, but be aware that there could be shutoffs. But we're going to make sure they're about as low as possible.
All right, thank you. Member Crow, you had a comment?
I just have a question. We're talking about scheduling future meetings. I'd just like to remind everyone that at the last meeting, we agreed that we were in a future date, we were going to have a UAB meeting dedicated to the 10-year site plan. I'd like to sort of amend that if I could and say 10-year site plan plus the integrated resource plan, which I think fits hand in glove with that. I think we need to set a date for that so we can kind of all study those issues and come prepared to make those discussions.
All right, I'll work with staff to see if we can get that on the schedule.
And let's not forget our plan as well. I know COVID's been pushing things off, but we do have, then we put together. Thanks.
Yep. All right. And Robin, I think our next meeting is August 13th.
Yes, that's correct.
All right. Same time, same channel, right?
Yes, unless we hear further that we won't have any more virtual meetings. That's set by the state, and so we'll know at the end of the month.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you. And thank you for everybody hanging in there, a long meeting, and keeping in touch over this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Everyone thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank
and
you, Mr. Chair.
congratulations, Todd, on retirement.
Hope you all stay well.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.